All right, I think it's up. So welcome to the stream. Today I'm just gonna be going through any questions that anyone has about the SAT while we're waiting for some people to join. And I see what's up, Brody. While we're waiting for some people to join, I'm going to kind of just start doing some questions that I've been wanting to do for a while. And yeah, so yeah, basically we'll just go through some posts or some videos. So yeah, let's start with we'll go through some question bank questions. So let's see here. Do the polar and flux question, write the long paragraph 1 in 1 of the book says. So okay, I'm actually gonna put into this live chat if you want to me to do a specific question, what you can do is send these links, or send the questions I should say, to, I'll put this in the chat. Send all of the questions, you can send any questions to this email, and then I will get them all done. Okay, let's see here. All right, so if you reload this page and then check in the description of this live, you should be able to see the link that I'm talking about. And so yeah, let me see here. All right, so let's start up with a question. So while I'm waiting for some questions to come in, I'm gonna start with a math question here. So okay, so for tomorrow's SAT, I actually think that there's going to be a lot of very difficult constant questions. So I think that a lot of you guys should spend your time learning all of the formulas, because for constant questions, it's basically figuring out which formulas you need to know, and then you plug in all of these constants or whatever restrictions they give you, and you plug it into the equations that you know. For example, vertex formula is so important for you to understand. The circle equation you should know. All of these different formulas you should understand. That way you can go in and actually do the questions, right? So let's look at some of these words in context questions, right? So I'll pull up. So with words in context, it's really hard to predict what's going to happen. And so what you have to do is learn how to answer them properly. So here's what you should do. The first thing you should do when you're doing a words in context question is read the question and ask yourself, what word would I put in the blank? So not what are the answer choices. And this is something you should do throughout the whole English section. When you're reading a question, try to answer it before you even read the answer choices. That way, it's like, okay, if I think that the answer is, if I think the answer is to lessen, and then answer choice B says diminish, then you know that that's the answer, right? So that's the first step, is to say, what word would I put here? Then what you would do is you should go in and look through the answer choices that you actually know the words for. So if you know two of the words, instantly you could either say it's one of those two words, or you know it's not two of those words, and now it's a 50-50. Then with the words you don't know, if it is going to be one of those two, so it's not the two that you know, it's one of the two that you don't know, first you should look and ask yourself, do I know of any words that are similar to this word, as close as you can? For example, on one of the practice tests, the word innocuous comes up, okay? And innocuous is very similar to the word innocent, okay? There's a word on another practice test, haphazard, that you could say, okay, I think this means hazard. Now, why does this work? This works because since these words are so close together, they have similar roots, they have similar suffixes, similar prefixes, and because of that, most of the time they'll be very similar in definition. So once you do that, you try and figure that out. Now, if you really cannot understand at all what the word is, just ask yourself, humans are it's kind of innate that we can almost determine if something is a positive or negative connotation. So try to ask yourself, is this positive or negative? And then go from there. Again, if you don't know the word, there's really nothing you can do. There are a lot of flashcard sets online that you can use, but I wouldn't spend the next couple hours studying for that unless it is the only thing on the whole test that you're getting wrong. As in, you have a 1550 and the 50 points you're losing are from the vocab. Otherwise, literally anywhere else that you can get study time from, you should do that instead. Now, for Desmos, there are a lot of ways that you can use Desmos. And so if we just take a look, let's pull up Desmos. So there's a couple different things here that you should know how to do. Obviously, you know how to just set things equal to each other. For example, if it says, 5x plus 10 equals 50, then you plug this in, you get a number. You know that. Now, another thing is when they give you 2 points on a graph, right? You have table, and then you can put, 1 and 10, and let's say they give you 2 and 20, and you click this line, and it tells you what the graph is. And then if they tell you that it's quadratic, whatever they tell you it is. Now, what if they said, I'm going to pose a question. They said, the function f of x, let's make this bigger. The function f of x has zeros at x equals -8, -5, and 6. And f of x can be written as, then we'll do f of x equals -x cubed minus ax squared minus bx minus c, right? And then they say find a plus b. So what are you going to do here, right? This question can get very, very confusing, and I'm going to show you what's going to happen when you try to do this question. What's going to happen is, so let's pull up Desmos right now. So, and then after this, I'll get to your question, Alex. So in this question, we have 3 points, okay? We have -8, -5, and 6, and they're all zeros, right? They're zeros. So I'm going to put a table and do -8, -8, 0, -5, 0, and 6, 0. And then I'm going to do, okay, let's make a graph. And it gives me 0x plus 0. That's weird, but you figure out, okay, well, it's cubic. So let's make it cubic. And it still gives you 0, right? It just gives you 0. What the problem is that you need to tell it that it needs to follow this format. Because what happens is when you tell it it's linear, for example, it's going to follow this format. F of x equals ax plus b, let's say. Desmos might say mx plus b. But it'll follow basically the format of mx plus b. If you tell it that it's quadratic, it's going to follow the format of ax squared plus bx plus c. If you tell it that it's cubic, then it would do ax cubed plus bx squared plus cx plus d. And so the problem here is that this is not what they told you the function is. So what you do is you come in here and you tell it, okay, well, we need it to say this. So you would come in here and you would do, let's see, you'd click this. You click this line, and you click export as custom regression and see how it comes up. You then make it follow the format that they gave you. So it would be -x cubed, and then it would be minus a, and then it would be minus b, and then minus c. And then if they wanted what is a plus b, you could just type in a plus b, or you could just add them in a calculator, and so you'd get -31, right? That's really important. And so you can use this to figure out any equation. There's a question on one of these practice tests where they give you like -7, -2, -6, -3, and -5, -6. And they tell you that like f of x is equal to a over x plus b, right? So instead of trying to figure out whatever it is, you just export it like this, and you would just write it's a over x plus b. But be careful, if you do it like this, you have to put a 1 next to the x, because it basically tells the graph that I need to guess, right? And then, by the way, you could always click on and off of these questions So yeah. Okay, so let me take a look at this question. This is actually a favorite of mine. I really like this question, Alex. So let's take a look here. Okay, so in this question, there's a couple different things we have to understand. First of all, this question is much easier than you think when you read it. So we're told, for an electric field passing through a flat surface perpendicular to it, the electric flux of the electric field through the surface is the product. So the flux, the electric flux, is the product of the field strength and the area. Okay, so it is the flux equals the strength times the area. Okay, the flux equals the strength times the area. And so that's basically the equation. They're giving us this equation in words. And so then we have, it says, a certain flat surface consists of two adjacent squares where the side length in meters of the larger square is 3 times the side length in meters of the smaller square. So basically we have this square, or two squares actually, where the smaller one, let's call the side length x, and let's call the big one and say that this has side lengths of 3x, right? Because it says that it has side lengths that are triple. And so it says an electric field with a strength of 29 volts per meter passes uniformly through the surface, which is perpendicular to the electric field. Then it says if the total electric flux of the field through the surface is 4640, what is the electric flux in volts times meters of the electric field through the larger square? So basically, they give us the strength. So the strength is 29, and they tell us the flux is 4640. So then we could find what the areas are, right? So what are the areas of these in terms of x? Well, so this is x times x, so x squared, and this would be 3x times 3x, so it's 9x squared, right? 3x times 3x, be careful, it's not going to be 3x squared, it's 9x squared. So if we add these two up, the total area that we have is 10x squared. And so now we can actually write down an equation. So we have 4640 equals 290 times x squared. And so why am I even doing this? Well, the reason I'm doing this is because in order to find the flux of just the larger square, I need to do the strength times the area. And so I have the strength. The strength is 29. It's going to be uniform. It says that it's uniform somewhere, right? So that means it's the same throughout the whole square. And so the area here is 9x squared, but I don't know what x is. I don't know what x squared is. So that's basically what I'm trying to find. And so if I divide both sides by 290, if you put this in your calculator, you would get 16. So 16 equals x squared. So now for this for the big square, right, we have 29 times the area is 9x squared. And so what's x squared? Well, it's 16. So you would do 29 times 9 times 16. And so I think you would get 4176 here. Let's check. 29 times 9 times 16. 29 times 9 times 16. So you get 4176. Now, what if I told you there was an even easier way to do this question? So much easier. All we have to do is realize that in this circle, in these squares, if this is x and this is 3x, so then this area is x squared and this one's 9x squared. What percentage of the total area does this take up? If this is 9x squared out of the 10x squared for the area, what would be the percentage it takes up? It takes up 90%. And so if it takes up 90% of the area, then it's going to take up 90% of the flux. And the reason why is because flux equals strength times area. So strength times area. And so what we're going to do is say, okay, well, it's proportional to the area. So if it's 90% of the area, it's 90% of the flux. This only works because it's just area, not area squared, area cubed, or strength squared, or strength cubed. And so, okay, it's 90% of the area, it's 90% of the flux. All you have to do is 4640 times 0.9. And if you did 4640 times 0.9, 4640 times 0.9, you get 4176. All right, so that also works. All right, so continuing. So I see there was a question, there was like this one question 22 with like 3 options that say 1 is true, 2 is true, both 1 and 2 are true. How on the march to T and I cannot find it. I don't remember a question like this. They do this on a lot of questions. If you I can try to look for a question like that in a minute. Go over a Tilde question. Yes, I will go over a Tilde question right now. And while I'm doing that, Angelica, what you should do to study last minute, first of all, if you have already been preparing, you should not spend too much time studying tonight. What you should do is look over the past tests you've taken, and if you want to be even more specific, look over the questions that you've consistently been getting incorrect. So I would just take a look through all of your past tests and just go over all the questions you've gotten wrong previously, assuming you've already looked at them after you took the test. So you got it wrong, you looked over the test, you're like, okay, I'm going to look over this and now I understand it. Look over it again. You want to make sure you don't get these questions wrong twice. So look over that, and then I would just make sure you understand your formulas, make sure you understand your punctuation, and make sure you have a concrete plan for how you're going to go about going through each module. Okay, so let's go over one or two Tilde questions. So first, I'll go over a pretty basic Tilde question, and then I'll go to a little bit more challenging of a question. So let's pull up. Let's see here. Okay, so by the way, while I'm looking for this, what is the Tilde doing? So a lot of people use it, but they don't actually realize what it means. And what it means is you're basically, when you use an equal sign, you're telling Desmos this equals that. If I say x equals 5, that's telling Desmos that x is 5. If I put a tilde, I'm saying I don't know what x equals, but I know it's equal to this. So I know that 3x plus 10 is equal to 5, but I don't know what x is. Guess. You tell me what x is. It's basically telling Desmos to start playing a guessing game, okay? And so when do you use it? You use it when you are unsure of a constant, right? On a lot of constant questions, on a lot of equivalent expression questions, you're going to use it. So let me just pull up a very basic example of a Tilde question, and we'll get into a little bit more complex ones after that. So let's say we don't know what a is here. But what we do know is that these two equations are equal. I know that 0.36 x squared plus 0.63x plus 1.17 is equal to a times 4x squared plus 7x plus 13. Right? So I don't know exactly what they are, but I know that they're equal. And so all I have to do is I basically tell Desmos that 0.36 x1. Okay, so when you do the Tilde questions, you have to write a 1 next to x, because basically when you're playing this guessing game with Desmos, if you tell it x, it's going to start playing the real game. It's going to want to graph x or do something like that. So you have to use x1. You use x1 and y1. If you're typing in a or b or c, you don't have to use a 1. So 0.36 x1, and then you would square that, and then you do plus 0.63 x1, and then plus 1.17. And then you use a tilde because you don't know what a is. You're going to tell it to guess. So you're going to do a times 4x1 squared. And then you would do plus 7x1. And then plus 13. And look at that. It's going to tell you what a is. Okay? Just to be safe, if it ever tells you x1 is equal to something, that's basically it's saying, okay, I'm going to guess what a is based on x being 1. But you want it to be certain no matter what x is. You want it to be true for x is 1, x is 2, x is 3, x is 4. So if it tells you this, give it several values to check with. So instead of just saying x is 1, how about we say x can be 1, 2, 3, or 4, right? And so you get 0.09. On this specific question, it didn't make a difference, but on other questions, you'll see that if you don't do this, you're going to get it wrong. Now, on top of this, just be careful. If they said, for example, that x needs to be greater than 2, you need to make sure that whatever you put in this list, x has to actually be greater than 0, right? Or it has to be greater than 2 there. So continuing on, right? This is pretty simple. So let's look at one that might be a little more challenging, and so we'll get into that. So if I have a system of equations, it becomes a little more challenging. So what I just did is I basically told the calculator that the left side equals the right side, right? And that's all I was able to do. But what if I have systems of equations? For example, on a lot of the percentage questions on the test where they say A is this percent of B and B is this percent of C, and then they're like, what is 8% of C? Or whatever, or A is what percent of C? It's a little challenging sometimes to figure out what's going on. So there's an easier way that we can do this using a tilde in Desmos. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that. So let me pull up a pretty good question. So let's go to percentages here. And by the way, all the questions I'm using right now are just straight from the SAT question bank. So let's take a look. All right, so we'll do this one. Okay. So in this question, it's telling us that, let's see, it's telling us that A is 70% less than B, and that the number C is 80% greater than A. So the first thing we should do is write down the equations that we can extract from what we were just told. So there's two different equations we can extract from this. The first one is it says A is 70% less than B. So how would we write that? Well, if A is 70% less than B, so A is 70% less than B. So this would mean that it's 30% of B, right? If I'm paying 70% off for an item, I'm paying 30%, right? So A is equal to 0.3B. And then it says the number C is 80% greater than A. So if I'm 80% greater, then I'm at 180%. So C is 180% of A, so it's 1.8 times A. So you have two different things here that you know what they're equal to, right? And it says C is how many times B? How many times B? Right, so what we could do here is, it actually wouldn't be too hard to solve this by hand, but just for the sake of showing the question, what we would do is we could tell the calculator, okay, A and C equal this and that. So what we do is we say on the left side, we put a list of the numbers that we know. So we know what A and C are going to equal. And then on the right side, we're going to match them up with what they actually equal. So A would be 0.3B, so that's going to come first. And C is going to be 1.8A, right? And then all we have to do is give it a number to check with. Because again, we're playing a guessing game. We have to give it a number to like base its guess off of. So it really doesn't matter if we say C equals this, B equals this, A equals that. It doesn't matter. So I'm just going to say, it says that B is a positive number. So I guess I'll go with B equals some positive number because it actually defined that B is positive. So let's say B is 10. And so now it's going to guess these numbers, right? If you look up here, it guesses these numbers. So C is how many times B? To do that, you would do C divided by B. And so it just gives us 0.54, right? That's all that we have to do for a question like that. And you're going to notice that in a lot of questions, it becomes much, much easier if we're going through that, right? So next up, what should I do if I'm scoring at around a 640 on the reading? The first thing you should do is make sure that your standard English conventions and your expression of ideas is near perfect. If you are scoring anywhere above a 600 on the English, that's the first thing that should become perfect. You need to make sure you're getting all the grammar questions right, and you need to make sure that you're getting all of the expression of ideas question right. The standard English conventions is grammar. The expression of ideas questions are going to be anything with the notes or anything with transitions. So make sure you understand that. Then go in with a concrete plan. What I would recommend is skip over the reading. So either do the vocab first and then go into the grammar and then go back to the reading after. Or some people do the test backwards, whatever you want to do. That way you can do the reading last. Then you need to be very, very diligent in what you're doing. Use the strike through in order to check off any answers that are incorrect. And Jordan, I'll get to this question after. And so for every reading question, the best tip I could give you is for every question, you should be striking through about 2 of the answer choices immediately. The game plan is you read the question, you read the passage, and then before you even read the answer choices, you say in your mind, I think the answer is this. And then you look for that answer, and you should immediately, if you just read through A, B, C, and D, cross out 2 of them. Usually they'll just be completely wrong. And then when you're stuck between A and B, here's what you do. If your answer is not specifically supported in the passage, it's not going to be right. You need to have a reason to think that something is true. And a great example is, if I say, I'm nervous about the first day of school because I don't know who I'm going to sit with at lunch, you might assume that that means that I don't want to go to school. But there's a big difference there, right? I'm nervous about school. That doesn't mean I don't want to go to school. And while this is an obvious example, a lot of people will get tripped up on the exam and will be going so fast that they don't really understand there is no best answer. There's one correct answer and 3 incorrect answers. So when you're stuck between those 2 answers, find the one that's not supporting the passage. Find the one that kind of overstates what the passage is saying, or kind of takes something the passage says and just runs with it and isn't really supported. It's like the researchers are 95% sure that this is true, and then the answer choice says that the researchers are certain. There's a difference there, right? So you have to be very, very careful. Additionally, I would make sure, if you're, especially on the module 2, if you're reading a question, let's say you do question 8 and it's a reading question and it's very long. Okay, it's long. It took you about 2 minutes to do, and now you do question 9. It's also really long. It takes you about 2 minutes too. And now you're on question 10, and it's long again, and you're like, wow, like I'm burnt out. Just skip it. Use the mark for review to the best of your ability, and just start marking questions for review. If you get to a question, on the math, and you're like, I don't know what's going on, just skip it and go back to it at the end. So yeah, that's really what I would do. So how do I know that I had to separate the A and the AC? So okay, basically in this Desmos with this tilde thing, what's going on is you tell Desmos that, well, with the first examples I gave, you told Desmos that the left side equals the right side. But the problem is now we have 2 things that are equal. So we have that the A equals 0.3B and the C equals 1.8A. So what I do in Desmos is I say, first on the left side, I list out, separated by commas, what I can define. So I can define here A, and I can define C, right? So if I can define A, then I'm going to write out A and C. Think of it as like X and Y. This is my X and this is my Y, right? It's almost like a point. And so that's going to equal, so what does A equal? Well, A equals 0.3B. So I put that first here because A was first, right? So these both go first, right? So this is my equation 1. And then my C is equal to 1.8A. So I say that, right? So this is my equation 2, right? So they both come 2. And so then all I have to do is, and again, it legitimately does not matter what number, and sorry, let me pull up the other Desmos. It doesn't matter at all what you told it that. I could have told it A is 100 and it would have given me the same answer. It literally doesn't matter if you say A equals this, B equals that, C equals that. Especially on these questions, it does not matter at all, because no matter what A, B, or C are, C is going to be 0.54 times B, right? So yeah, hopefully that answered your question. I can pull up a couple more tilde questions if you need. Okay, transition questions. These are one of the most easy yet confusing questions, because if you don't understand what you're looking for, you're going to get them wrong. But once you know how to go through them, you should get most of them correct. So here's what you should do on these questions. Let me actually pull one up. I'm going to pull up a transition question, because so many people struggle with this. And once it clicks, they're so simple. So let's take a look. I'll pick a difficult one. So let's look. All right, so I'll pick this one. I like this one. This one's from one of the practice tests. So, okay. So in this question, we have the prime meridian, the global indicator of 0 degrees longitude, established in 1884, was originally determined using astronomically derived coordinates. So it's talking here about the prime meridian, right? And so what we're going to do is, now we have this blank where we're supposed to put a transition. We're going to first ask ourselves if we can either say that the sentence after the period is either contrasting or agreeing. That's the first thing we should say. Sometimes it won't be either. Then you ask yourself, is it adding on? Is it giving another example? Is it specifying something? So it's literally just giving a definition of what the prime meridian is and when it was established. And it was originally determined using astronomically derived coordinates. And then it says, as decades passed, new calculations would reveal increasingly precise coordinates. So new decades would pass, 10 years would go by, and they would find new coordinates, and then 10 more years, and they have new coordinates, and then 10 more years, and there's new coordinates. So it's happening over and over, right? So that's another thing. Just like with the vocab, you should be you should be thinking, what word would I put there? So I would put, it's happening like continuously, it's happening over and over, right? So if something's happening over and over, it would be again and again, right? I would say that you should, like read the whole thing, obviously, but here it's kind of obvious that it should be, not obvious, but it's there's a clear indicator that it should be again and again, because new calculation would reveal increasingly precise coordinates over and over, right? And then it remained unchanged. All of this is kind of extra. It's kind of fluff. All of this is fluff. Something you have to get good at, especially if you want to move higher into the 700 range, is especially for the for the grammar questions, you have to figure out what is the fluff, what is just completely irrelevant, and it will really, really help you once you start realizing that, right? Okay, so to that end is going to show a contrast, okay? Additionally, that said is also another contrast. Let me see if I can get an example up. Let me see. So basically what you should do tonight is just pull up like a chart of transitions. Like if you just search up, let's see, if I just search up transitions chart and study that, because a lot of people will get tripped up on like all of these transitions, and now they're like I met some people who are trying to determine like what the actual definition is. Like they're trying to say, what does therefore definitively mean? No, you literally just need to know, is it a contrast or is it not? Is it an agreement or is it not? Is it adding on or is it taking away? Things like that, right? Okay, so Klein, I would love to answer that question. So two different ways we can answer this question. Let's see here. I'm going to pull it up. I actually have it. I know exactly where it's going to be. So let's get this question up. Okay. All right. So, okay. So let's get Desmos up. So if you want to look definitively at like what to that end means, it's going to mean like, it's something along the lines of like trying to achieve something. Like you're trying to get somewhere. It's like you would be talking about this, usually maybe in a science passage, it would be like, I'm trying to find something. Like to that end, I did this, or I can't think of a specific example here. But again, it's more about like being able to like, yeah, what you're saying is like seeing, is it like, oh yeah, like is it like a cause and effect? Is it not a compare and contrast? Is it is it adding on, taking away? Things like that. So yeah. Anyway, this question, beautiful question, several different ways we can solve it. The first thing, so yeah, by the way, so like to that end is like almost signifying that there's like a goal in mind. So anyway, for this question, we have the positive number A is 2,241%, the sum of B and C. So this would be saying that A, so what's 2,241% as a decimal? That's 22.41, right? You divide it by 100. And the sum of the numbers B and C would be B plus C. Then you have that B is 83% of C. So you would say B equals 0.83 times C. And it says what percent of B is A. So when they ask you these questions, they ask what percent of this is that. This number is how many times this number. They're basically telling you, get these two numbers alone. So here we have A, B, and C here. And then here we have B and C. We need to get B and A together. So we should be thinking, can we use substitution here? So we can. I can divide both sides of this by 0.83, and I'll get B over 0.83 equals C. And so then I can substitute this in for C. And so now I'm going to have A equals 22.41 times B plus, and instead of C, it's going to be B over 0.83. And so then all I have to do is you're basically trying to get a is equal to some number. Let's call it c, or I'm not going to call it c because that might be confusing. It's not this c. Let's call it p times our number b, where p is going to be like the number that we have it multiplying by. So let's say it's 50b. Then you would say that a is 5,000% of b because you would do 50 times 100, right? So you could also think about it as we're trying to find that like a is p over 100 times b, where p is going to be the percent. So if we distribute this 22.41, we'll get a equals 22.41b. And then here, if I put 22.41 into my calculator divided by 0.83, we're going to get 27. So divided by 0.83, we'll get 27. So plus 27b. And so if I add these two up, I get a equals 49.41b. So be careful. You don't pick 49.41. That's the decimal version. But what's the percentage version? We have to move the decimal over to the right too. So it becomes 4,941%. Now, we could have also solved this in Desmos. Once we got to, let's see. So once we got that a, I'll write it up here. A was equal to, let's delete that. We got that a was equal to 22.41 times b plus c. And we got that b was equal to 0.83 times c. We could have just gone into Desmos and used our tilde. So I could have said that, let's see, let's drop here. Okay, so we could have said that our, and actually no, I'm blocking that. Let's just do it here. So we could have said that our a, so first we put the two things that we can define, so a and b, okay? And then we're going to come down into Desmos, and we're going to use our tilde, and we're going to then write that it's, what's the a mean? It's 22.41 times b plus c. So I'm then going to go in and I'm going to write 22.41 times b plus c. B plus c. And then, comma, now what's the b, right? So the b is 0.83c. So then you write 0.83c. And that's basically telling Desmos what these two things are equal to. Okay? And then what I would do is say, okay, you could literally tell Desmos any number equals any number. So as in, I could tell it a equals 10, b equals 20, c equals 30. It doesn't matter. As long as as long as a is positive. So I'll tell it, like, let's say I make a equal to 10, and it's going to give me these numbers. And so then all you have to do is, if you realize, just like I wrote over here, I wrote that you're basically asking yourself, let's come over here. You're basically asking yourself, a is equal to p over 100 times b. This is basically saying a is p% of b. That's what it's asking. So you could literally write a over b. And so that's how you get the 49.41 that we got, right? And then you would just multiply it by 100, because if you're talking about percentages, you have to multiply it by 100. So you get 4941, right? I can show you another percentage example if you'd like, but it also works just as well if you just do it by hand. Now you ask, why did I substitute the 2241 in for b? So it's not that I substituted in the 22.41 for b. It's that the 22.41, it's saying the positive number a is 2,241% of the sum of b and c, right? So as a decimal, a is 22.41 times the sum of b plus c. So then, and let's move all this stuff back. So then when I move all of this, I'm going to substitute the b over 0.83 in for c, because I need to get an equation that only has a and b in it. And so I just leave the 22.41 there, and I distribute it to the b and the b over 0.83, right? So it's basically distributing. It's the same as saying if I had a equals, let's say, 2 times b plus 3b, or let's do b plus b over 2. You would distribute the 2 to here, and you would say, okay, a equals 2b, and then you would distribute the 2 to here, and so 2 over 2 is 1, so you would just do 2b plus b, right? So that would be all we would have to do there. And so yeah, let's look at another percentage question here, because there's a pretty good amount that we can find on the SAT question bank. So let's take a look at some of these. That's fine. So, okay. So I'll do this one by hand, and then I'll show you it again in Desmos. So, and then yeah, I'll open up the practice test 6. So if we take a look here, we have the number A is 190% greater than the number B. So, oh, and so PCSN, to that end, it signifies that we have like a goal in mind. It's almost like for that reason. I think I had said that up there. It's like talking about like we have a goal in mind. And so yes, it would be like a cause and effect. I tried to look for an example on the question bank, and I couldn't find an exact one. If you're referring to another question, I didn't see you send through another question. So if there was, feel free to put it in here, and I'll get to that. Right. So continuing into this question, we have the number A is 190% greater than the number B. So we would write down, okay, A is 190% greater than B. So it's not 190% of B, it's 290% of B. You have to be careful here. If I have $100 and I get 190% more, I'm only going to have, or sorry, not only, but I'm going to have 290%. PCSN, I can't see any link you sent. If you go into the description of this video, if you reload it and then go into the description, you should see an email. Send the message you have through this email, and then I'll get to that. So we have A is 190% greater than the number B. So it's 290%. So it's 2.9 times B. And then we have the number B is 80% less than 24. So B is 80% less than 24. So it's 20% of 24. So it would be 0.2 times 24. So this one's not that bad. You would just do, okay, what's 0.2 times 24? So you'd say, okay, so 0.2 times 24. And once you find that, then you could just put that in for B. So 0.2 times 24 is 4.8. And so we'd get that B is 4.8. And so you would just plug this in for your B. Basically, it's just a matter of playing the substitution game. So you do 2.9 times 4.8. You get 13.92, right? So the answer there would be B, right? And so continuing on, and then let me get into this practice test, this practice test 6. And again, if you guys have any specific questions that you want to send through a screenshot or anything else, email it to the email that is in the description of this live stream, and I will get straight into that question, right? So getting into the practice test 6, if I could pull this up. And then, yeah, I'll get to your question, PCSN, first. Okay, so there actually is, I actually saw a way today that you could do this question in Desmos. So, and then, yeah, I'll re-explain that question a little. So, to do this by hand, we have, okay, so I guess you do know how to do it by hand, but just in case anyone doesn't know, it's saying here that we have this function and that it passed through negative 24, 0, and f of 24 is less than 0. So all you have to do is, first of all, we should know that if I have the function of square root x just blank, like if I just said f of x equals square root x, the parent function of this is just like this. So that's just to determine kind of the shape of the graph. And so here, if, and by the way, the reason it was 2.9 was because 290% is, if I say 190% more than, now I'm at 290%, right? You have to include that initial 100% you started at. So we have the point of negative 24, 0 right here, let's say. And then it says f of 24 is less than 0. So f of 24 over here is negative. I don't know exactly where, but it's negative. So it's going to go down, right? And so, yeah, I can make this bigger. Let's see. So let's see here. Okay, let's get this to be bigger. Okay, so I have, back to this, let's draw this in red. So I have that this is negative 24 comma 0, and then this is f of 24 is less than 0. So this graph opens like this. And so even if it's not an exact point, I know it's less than 0. So this is a point of negative 24 comma 0. And so let's plug this into f of x and see what would happen. So I would plug in 0 for our y, so that's for our f of x, and then negative 24 is our x. So I'd say 0 equals a times the square root of negative 24 plus b. And you say, okay, like, can I figure anything out from here? You actually can. So the a can't be 0. If the a was 0, then the whole function would be 0. So then how could this be equal to 0? Well, the square root has to equal 0 then. So then that means that, the square root of negative 24 plus b needs to equal 0. Because if I have a times 0, then I'll be at 0, right? So then, therefore, negative 24 plus b should equal 0. And so that would mean that b is 24. So that's how we get b. And then if you have that this parent function, like I was talking about, opens upward, and now we're opening downward, just like it is with the quadratics, right? If a quadratic is positive, or let's just say a regular quadratic where it's like x squared opens like this, but if it's negative x squared, so this is positive x squared, and so negative x squared will open downward, right? So therefore, a is less than 0, right? A is going to be negative here. So a is less than 0. So if a is negative and b is positive, then a has to be less than b. Now, if we went into Desmos here, what we could do is I could just say that I have the point of negative 24, and let's actually go into a table. So I'm going to go into a table and type in negative 24 and 0. And then, again, I don't know exactly what b is, or sorry, I don't know exactly what the point is when we're at 24. But what I do know is that when I'm at 24, I'm less than 0. So let's just say it's 24 comma negative 10, right? You can make it any negative number. And so once I do that, and let's pull this back up. Let's close this. So once I pull that up, I'm going to then export a regression. So I'll just click add regression and then click export as custom regression. And I'm going to make the regression be a square root x plus b. So a times square root of x1, and then I'll do plus b, right? And so if we look at this, it's going to give us that b is 24 and a is negative 1.4. So then we would have to say that our a is obviously less than our b, right? And no matter what you wrote as this number, as long as you wrote that it was negative, because f of 24 has to be less than 0, you would get that a is going to be some negative number. And again, some negative number has to be greater than a positive number, right? So that's how we would get that question. So, okay, going back in, we have a question from practice test 8, and then I'll get into the question that you had, Klein. So this is another question that a lot of people struggle on, and so this one I'm gonna type it actually, or actually it's gonna be a lot to type out. So let's go in here. Let's say I'll type it. So we have the triangle XYZ, or in triangle XYZ, y is a right angle, the measure of z is 33, and the length of YZ is 26. If the area of XYZ is K tan 33, what is K? That's basically what this question is asking. So first, with a geometry question, we should draw this, right? And by the way, PCSN, if it's saying A is 0, make sure that you're writing out that it's A times x1. And also make sure that you're putting in some negative number as well. If you're just putting in x, it probably won't even show you a number. So yeah. I'm not sure. It should look like this, right? If a was equal to 0 here, then the whole thing wouldn't be a function. The whole point of when I did it by hand was that it see, like with f of x, right, that's not going to work. You have to do a tilde. This is basically telling it to make a regression line and guess what a is. So with this question, we would draw the triangle. So it says z is a right, or it says y is a right angle, right? So y is this right angle, and then we have, let's just call this x and z. And it says that z is 33. And it says the length of YZ is 26, and says what is K? So I would do, okay, well the area is 1/2 base times height. And so, well the height here is x. Let's call this x. And so I would say, all right, well how can I find x? And you should get the hint that you're probably going to have to use tangent, right? So I could use tangent. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. So I'll say tangent of this angle 33 equals the side opposite of it, so x, over 26. And so if I multiply the 26 over, I'll get 26 tangent of 33 equals x. And so this x, right, that's my height, right? That's my height. So that's my height. So the area now is 1/2, sorry, 1/2. And then my base is 26. And my height is 26 tangent of 33. So all I have to do is I would just do basically this part. I would do 1/2 times 26 times 26. So I would do 1/2 times 26 times 26. You get 338, right? And then, by the way, to get a cube root, you go down to the keyboard, you go to functions, you scroll all the way down, and then you go right here, right? I think it's easier to just do, and so you do like 3 and then, x, whatever. I think it's easier to just do it this way and just learn how to do it as a exponent, not only because it's faster, but also because you might have to know how to do this for other problems. So you should know how to do this anyway. Anyway, let's go into practice test 6. Let's see here. Let's see. All right, practice test 6, and you asked, oh, I didn't even know that you could type cube root, right? I didn't even know that, so I guess that works as well. So for SAT practice test 6, you wanted me to go through question 20 and 21 in module 2. So let's look. Okay, so let's take this out. All right, so let's take a look at this question. We have a table, and we're told that it shows values of x and their corresponding values of g of x, where g of x equals f of x over x plus 3, and f is a linear function, so f is linear, right? And so the first thing that I want to do is, I'm thinking to myself, I need to find points on f of x. Because if I can find 2 points on a linear line, I can make the equation for it, right? So if I have 3 points on g of x and I have like this equation relating f of x and g of x, I can say that g of x times x plus 3 equals f of x, just multiplying out the f of x, or sorry, multiplying out the x plus 3. So what I'm going to do is just write out, okay, so let's find f of negative 27, right? So I'll flip this, by the way. So I'll write f of x equals g of x times x plus 3. And so I'll do g of negative 27, or sorry, f of negative 27. So f of negative 27 equals g of negative 27, just plugging in negative 27 for x, times negative 27 plus 3. So I would do f of negative 27 equals g of negative 27 is 3, right, based on this graph, or table, sorry, times negative 27 plus 3 is negative 24, which equals negative 72. So this gives us the point of negative 27 for our x, comma negative 72. So now I just need one more point. And so I'll use this one. So I'll say that f of negative 9, this is our x, is going to equal g of 21, or sorry, not g of 21, g of negative 9, times negative 9 plus 3, right? Again, just plugging it into this equation. And so then I would get, this is going to be f of negative 9 equals, g of negative 9 is 0, times, we have negative 6. So 0 times negative 6 is 0. So this gives us our second point of negative 9 comma 0. And then bam, we have 2 points. We have negative 27 comma negative 72. And then we have negative 9 comma 0. Then once we get to that point, we should plug it straight into Desmos. So if we go into Desmos, we should make a regression. So I'll make a table, and I'll do negative 27, comma, negative 72, negative 9, 0. And then you just click this line. It gives you your equation. What's your y-intercept? It's 0, comma, 36, right? So, yeah, not too bad. You just have to know that you need to manipulate that equation, right? So let's get into this next question. Okay, so this question is this is a what's it called, a similar triangle question. So let's take a look at this one. When do I know to on a constant question use regression in Desmos? Basically, if you can set two equations equal to each other, you should use Desmos. I think I have a hunch that on this SAT they're gonna make it harder to use Desmos because a lot of people have started to realize how good Desmos is. Like back in this November and December, not a lot of people were using, you know, regressions and specifically like the tilde. Like nobody was really talking about that online, and if they were, not a lot of people were seeing it. And so I think they're gonna start realizing, you know, because they pull their statistics that a lot of people are getting these questions right, and they're going to make them harder. Time management in the reading writing section. I saw something today that I thought was really great. Someone said, don't worry about the time. Obviously, you should try not to run out of time. First of all, you should be skipping the reading and doing that last. So do the middle section, do the middle part last. But if you're going to run out of time with one or two questions, that's not terrible, okay? You don't have to get every question right. Obviously, if you want to get a 1600, you do. But if you're trying to get even like a 1500, 1450, you don't have to get every question right. So why not spend your time getting every single question that you can do correct? And then if you miss, you know, one or two questions, that's all right. But if you're rushing yourself in order to not run out of time, you're gonna get other questions wrong in the mix, and it's gonna end up getting you more questions wrong than those 1, 2, or 3 questions that you might have missed. So let's look at this question. This is an interesting one. So on this question, we have the length of BC is equal to 132. So length of BC is 132, and then it says the length of AB is root 363, and then it says that it's asked what's the value of BC over BD. So it looks like these are similar triangles. It might be a little hard to tell, but this should be a right angle. And the reason why is because if this point creates an arc that's half of the circle, then this point is 90. Okay, this point is half of that arc. So this A is 90. And so that A being 90, and then also the fact that this angle C is shared by both triangle ADC and triangle this big triangle, let's say, makes it very, I mean, these are going to be similar triangles. So let me try to draw these. So if we have, it's a pretty good question. So let's just draw it like this, let's say. And so this is A, C, and B, right? And so this is root 363, and this is going to be 132, right? So first of all, I can figure out what AC is by doing the Pythagorean theorem. So I'll say root 363 squared, let's call this B, plus B squared equals 132 squared. Sorry, this should be a 132. So so you would get, let's simplify this first. So 363 plus B squared equals 132 squared. So you would say B squared equals 132 squared minus 363. So you would say B equals the square root of 132 squared minus 363. And so bam, now you can plug this into Desmos. So square root of 132 squared minus 363. And so you get this, right? And so honestly, it might just be easier for me to leave it like this and say that it's going to be the square root of 17061. So the square root of 17,061. Okay, great. So now we have this. And so if this is, let's say this is now the square root of 17,061, right? And so this is similar to triangle ADC. So if I draw triangle ADC, let's say this is, A is, what is this? 17, root 17,061. This is A, D, and C, right? And so this triangle is, let's call this X. Okay, this length is X. This DC is 132 minus X, right? And then I don't know yet what this is. So I can figure out what X is. So I would be able to basically figure out what this is, and then I would be able to then figure out what DC is. And then once I get these two sides, I can figure out everything. So how do I figure out what's going to go on here? Well, what I could say is, okay, these two sides match up in the triangles, as in the 132 and the root 17,061 should match up in each triangle because they are the hypotenuses, right? They are both the hypotenuses. And then if we look at these triangles, it looks like the DC, this, let's call this DC, is going to match up with the root 17,061 because those are the two larger squares. So the two larger sides. So you do small over big equals small over big. So you're going to do, you'd say 132 over root 17,061 equals, then you would do 132 minus X over root 17,061. Or sorry, you would do, sorry, it's supposed to be the opposite. This should be flipped. So root 17,061. Because you have to do, basically you do the small sides over the big sides. So the small side of 17,061 over the big side of 132. And that goes over 132 minus X and then whatever. So we would cross multiply these like the butterfly. But honestly, it'd be easier to just go straight into Desmos and say that 17 square root of 17,061 over 132 is, and then you draw your squiggly line. Let's do 132 minus x1 over square root of 17,061. And you get that x1 is 2.75. So if x1 is 2.75, that means this is 2.75. So then DC is 132 minus 2.765. Or sorry, not 765, just minus 2.75. So this is 129.25. And then now it wants BC over BD. So BD is 2.75. And BC is 132. So you would do 132 over 2.75. So 132 over 2.75. You get 48. All right, that's a pretty challenging question. I'm interested to see if any of you would have solved that a different way. But yeah, that's like the hardest special right triangle, or not special right triangle, but similar triangle question we'll get. Basically, you have to figure out that this big triangle is similar to the smaller one, and then you'd have to go about figuring out which sides match up to which sides, and then yeah. So let's look at I have some questions here that someone wants me to do. Question bank ID. Let's see. 8D. Might be hard to find these with just the. Yeah, it's gonna be hard to find these with just the ID, right? Let's take a look at. I know that Klein, you had wanted me to do another question here. So this is actually a good question. Let's take a look at this. And Stacy, if you would want to send me like pictures of the questions, or even just what topic they are in the question bank, that way I could find them a little easier. I'd be happy to go over some of these questions that you want me to do. So let's take a look at what we should do for this question. So we have a circle with a center G and points M and N lying on the circle, and then we have line segments MH and NH being tangent to the circle. So if I draw the circle, and actually let me make it look nice. So we have this, and we have points M and N. I'll just put them at random points. So I'll put them here, and I'll put them here. And so if they're tangent to the circle, that means, first of all, so okay, let me make a right angle, or let me make G. This would be the center, right? So two things. One is, if this is the radius, they're going to make a right angle with the radius. So if I draw this, it looks something like this. It looks something like this. Let me finish this, right? So, okay, that's what it would look like, because they meet at the same point of H, right? We have MH and NH, right? So it says that the radius of the circle is 168. So then this is 168 and this is 168, right? And so if these two, so this is a right angle and this is a right angle. So these points are both going to meet at the same point, and they're the same distance from the center of the circle. Okay, then that means that they have the same length. These lines have the same length, right? So all we have to do is, first of all, let's figure out what this length is. So if the perimeter is 3856, then you would say, okay, these two sides share a length of 36. So, or sorry, they share a length of whatever's left, right? So we would do 3856 minus 168 minus 168, right? And we get 3520. And then they share that 3520, right? 3520 divided by 2. They each get 1760. So they each get 1760. And so now it wants the length of GH, right? It wants the distance between G and H. So what I'm going to do is I'll just write, I mean, this is the Pythagorean theorem, because this is a right triangle here. So it's 168 squared. It's 168 squared plus 1760 squared equals c squared, right? So I'll do the square root of 168 squared plus 1760 squared equals c squared. And I don't even have to, or equals c, sorry. And I don't even have to solve this because only one of our answer choices is greater than 1760, right? So the answer would have to be D here. But if you put it into a calculator, you would get that at 1768. Now let's look. Score predictions. I got 1530, 1550, 1560 on the last few practice tests. Been doing the grammar first on English. It's been working better for me timing-wise. Yes, so I actually prefer to do the grammar first. Basically anything where you don't have to do the reading first. Now, two reasons I like this. One is, first, the grammar is much easier. Like, it takes much less actual thought. Not that it's easier, but it takes much less thought than the reading, right? Like, for the reading, you have to really read. And so what you should do is, why not start with something that's going to be easier? Ease yourself into it. It's like almost like a warm-up. And that way, it'll kind of get your mind going. And now something else you should be doing to warm up your brain is read the news before you go into the test. It doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter what you read. Just make sure it's something that's boring. I kind of live by this. You should read the news before the test. Okay, it will get your brain warmed up. That way you'll kind of be, locked in for the test. So continuing, I wouldn't say that like if you're scoring consistently at a 1530, 1550, 1560. I mean, when I took my test, I took my test back in October of 2023, and the couple weeks before the test, I was scoring like consistently like between 1530 and 1580, and then I went in on test day and I got a 1570. I think it's a little different now because it's kind of hard to gauge where you're at fully because of the fact that the questions on the test are just harder than the practice test. When I took my test in October 2023, it was still on paper. And so the way it worked was they would send you back your score with the questions you did. And so they would get put online all the time because everyone was sent their scores and what they put. You guys can't see what you did anymore. And so it was much easier to practice. So like the questions, what I was doing to practice was, when I went in for October, I had taken all the practice tests for the last 3 years, or all the real SATs, sorry, for the last 3 years. So it's it was much easier. So I think that you should be prepared to see questions that are harder than what you're used to, unless you've been using some type of external third-party testing site where the tests are purposely harder. But if your scores you're saying on the 3 practice tests you took last were from College Board, I would be prepared for the questions not to be different topics, but to just be in general harder to do than what you're used to seeing. Right, so continuing on, and let's look at what you just sent me, PCSN. Yes, this looks like a fine way. This is basically the same. This is basically the same way of answering it. Okay, so if you have 2 triangles that are similar, there's a couple of different ways that you can set the sides equal. So let's say this is 2 and let's call it 3 and 4, and then this is 6 and x. This is obviously a simple example, but to find x, you could either use 3 over 6 equals 4 over x, or you could do 3 over 4 equals 6 over x. Basically, anything where you put these, like you match up like where everything is. So I recommend doing small over big equals small over big. You put the small side in one triangle with the big side that it matches up in the other triangle. Put the small side here with the big triangle, with the big side in the other triangle. And Harry, yes, you can use your graphing calculator, and I actually recommend bringing it. I think that you should use, if you're comfortable with a graphing calculator, use that for all the arithmetic. If you're doing multiplication, if you're adding things, do that in the graphing calculator that you have with you, and then do Desmos for like the regressions, for like any of that stuff, for like graphing. So yes, it is fine. You can use the graphing calculator, but you should also get used to Desmos. It is pretty helpful. So let's take a look at some let's actually talk about what I think you guys are likely to see tomorrow. So first of all, given that a lot of people have become very comfortable with Desmos, I think that they as in the SAT, they run these statistics. They say who's getting this right, how are people doing on this and this, and they're gonna realize, or they must have already seen, PCSN, we actually have a cheat sheet. It should be linked in the description of this live. If you go to our Buck Soup shop, we should have a cheat sheet for you guys posted. So anyway, back to what we think you're going to see. I think you're going to see a lot of constant questions because, again, they must have noticed that all these questions that you can do in Desmos, people are now getting right so much more. And it's much harder to do constant questions in Desmos, especially if they make it hard to use the tilde and to use the regressions, because they can do that. It gets very, very difficult. So I think you should be expected to see these constant questions and expected to do a lot of geometry and probability, because it is very hard to do those in Desmos. So be prepared to see difficult geometry questions. On the past couple exams, there have been very, very challenging questions, okay? Then you should be prepared to see a lot of probability and statistics. Questions like, if I take a data set with 15 points and I add, let's say, 30 to every point, what happens to the mean? You should be expected to know what's going on there, right? And obviously, like, the mean would increase. And I'm looking right now if I can find these, why the links aren't working for you guys. Let's see here. Take a look at this link. That should definitely work. So if we take a look at let's see what your question was. So so let's take a look at some of these questions that you sent in, Stacy. Okay, this is a great one, and this is a question that, speaking of what I think you're gonna see, I'm certain I would really be surprised if you don't see a question like this. I'd be really surprised if you don't see a question like this. And so basically, if we have a system of equations and they tell us that it doesn't have any solutions, what it's saying is that we have the same slope, okay? And the reason why is because in order for two linear lines to never touch, they have to have the slope being the same. So when you get a question like this, what you should be doing is asking yourself, what is the slope? And then from there, you get y alone, and then you set the slopes equal. And so you get y alone. So let's subtract. Let's do this one first. So we would do 4x minus 9y equals 9y plus 5. And so then we would add 9 to both sides and subtract the 5. So we do 4x minus 5 equals 18y. And then we'll divide both sides by 18. So I'll say 4 over 18 times x minus 5 over 18 equals y. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the h one. So we have hy equals 2 plus 4x. So we'll divide both sides by h. So y equals 2 over h plus 4 over h times x. And so we set the slopes equal, right? In order for it to have no solutions, the slope has to be the same. So you set 4 over 18 equal to 4 over h. So 4 over 18 equals 4 over h. And I mean, here, if the 4 on the top is the same and they're equal, then the bottom has to also be the same. So it's 18. If you're ever confused about a question like this, you can just go straight into Desmos and make it a tilde type of question. So you could just type in 4 over 18 is 4 over h. And it'll tell you that h is 18, right? So the answer there would be D. So continuing on, I had seen that there was a question about the positive number a is 230% of b. It's from the question bank. So let's take a look at that. So going into this, that's a little bit more percentages again. So let's look at this. See if I can find it. And if I can, I'll just do one that's similar. And then again, guys, if you have any questions, you can either send them through this chat, or you can send them to the email that's in the description. If you are not able to open up the link to our Buck Soup shop, I just updated. You should be able to get in. If you reload the page to this live stream, you should be able to see our Buck Soup shop. So let's look. And then yes, so this question, I'm about to do the percentage question that Klein asked for, and then I'm going to do this question for PCSN, the inscribed inside of a circle question. So we have this number a is 230% of the number b, so that would be a is equal to 2.3 times b, okay? And then a is 60% of c, so a is equal to 60% of c, so 0.6 times c. And it says what percent of c is p? Or if c is p percent of b, what is the value of p? And thank you, JV, for coming in to watch. I wish you luck tomorrow on your exam. So what we should do is plug this in for A, right? Because again, it says C is P% of B. So it's basically telling you get C and B in their own equation without anything else. So I'm going to say 0.6C equals 2.3B. And then all I have to do is I would divide both sides by 0.6. And so you would get, let's see here, if you did 2.3 over 0.6, you'd get 3.83. So that means that C is equal to 3.83 times B, right? So what percentage of B is C, right? It's 383% because you move the decimal over. So the answer there would be D, right? So let's take a look at an inscribed shape question. So let's see here. Let's go into the question bank, and let's look through some circles. So with inscribed shapes, first of all, it's important to understand the following. If you put a square inside of a circle and you split it down, if you split it with a diameter, you are going to get a 45-90 triangle. Well, you get two of them actually. And if you have a rectangle inside of a circle and you split it in half diagonally, it's going to end up being a 30-60-90 triangle, okay? And so that's basically the whole basis of like most of the questions that you're going to see. So let's pull this up, and then while I'm going through that, so my English tips, first of all, you should be looking for the wrong answers, not the right answers. You need to completely flip your mindset from let's find the right answer to let's find all the answers that are wrong. When I took my SAT, and still whenever I have to take PSATs in school, I rarely ever am looking for the right answer. On the grammar I am, because the grammar is simple, you figure out which is right. But the questions about reading, you should really be able to find the incorrect answers, and not I mean, obviously you should be able to find the correct answers, but the incorrect answers are easier to find because all you have to ask yourself is, first of all, two of them will be obviously wrong, and then you say, okay, I'm left with two. One of them is not supported in the passage. One of them is like, blasphemy, for lack of a better term. And so once you start kind of realizing that that's the gameplay and that's the method, and it's like you're just using strike through to strike through three of them, and whichever one you don't strike through is your answer, that your life will become so much easier. Okay, so with your question, the reason why that happens, why the rectangle is not 45-45-90 is because if we look at this, the rectangle can only be a 45-45-90 in a 45-45-90. First of all of the sides have to be the same for the bases, right? So let's just call this S, S, and S root 2, right? So because in the 45-45-90, these sides have to be the same, and in a rectangle they're not, it can't be a 45-45-90. And so when we cut this in half, it happens to be that if it fits inside of a circle and it's a rectangle, it'll end up being a 30-60-90. I feel like most of the time they end up just telling you, they'll like give you a hint. They'll be like, the diagonal is double the shortest side or something like that. There's a question that I actually wanted to pull up, and then I'll get to your question, David. There's a question where you have to know this on one of these tests, and I'd love to pull it up. I can just give it from my I'll write it down. So let's see. There is a rectangle inscribed in a circle. If the diagonal of the rectangle is 2 times the length of the shortest side, and the area of the rectangle is 1089 times square root 3. What is the length of the diameter of the circle? Okay, and so then after this question, I'm going to go into a couple of the questions that I had emailed to me. So in this question, we have a rectangle inscribed in a circle. So by the way, inscribed, basically throw that word out, and it basically means inside. So there's a rectangle inside of a circle. So we have it like this. And it says that the diameter, and actually let's move this so that you guys can see it. So it says that the diameter, or the diagonal, which you'll find out is the same, the diagonal of the rectangle is twice the length of the shortest side. So this would be 2x, and the shortest side here, let's call it x. And so this is going to be the beginning of a setup for a 30, 60, 90 triangle, right? Across from the 30 is x, across from the 60 is x root 3, and across from the 90 is 2x. So then this is x root 3. And so it says that the area of the rectangle is 1089 root 3. So if the area for this rectangle, it's length times width, right? So let's call this the width, and let's call this the length, right? So it's length times width, which is going to equal x root 3 times x, which is x squared root 3. And it tells us that the area is 1089 root 3. So that equals 1089 square root 3. And so we just have to find x. So we would cross this out. We'd say x squared equals 1089. You would square root both sides. And you'd say, okay, x equals 33. And so now it wants the length of the diameter. And we realize that the diagonal of the rectangle is the diameter. So if the diagonal is 2x, well then 2x equals 66. So our diameter is 66. And so the answer to that question there is it's going to be 36. Okay, and so this next question is one of my absolute favorites. I love this question. And so we have this question here that says a window repair specialist charges $220 for the first 2 hours of repair plus an hourly fee for an additional hour. It says the total cost for 5 hours of repair is $400, and then it talks about which function f gives the total cost in dollars for x hours of repair where x is greater than or equal to 2. So all you have to do is, first of all, you ask yourself, how much was I paying per hour at the start? Well, I paid $220 for 2 hours, right? So I would say, okay, I paid $110 an hour, right? Because I was paid $220 for 2 hours, so I paid $110 an hour. And then for the next 3 hours, so in total in 5 hours I paid $400. If for the first 2 hours I paid $220, so for the remaining 3 hours I paid $180, which means I was paying $60 an hour. So then I'm going to go down to $60 an hour. The slope of these equations is always going to be the second amount you had, okay? So it's going to be 60x plus, and then you subtract these two. You do 110 minus 60, and you multiply it by however many times you spent the first slope, or however many times you use the first slope. So we use that first slope for 2 hours. So you multiply that by 2. So you would do 60x plus 50 times 2. And here's why. It's asking what could be an equation for the hourly cost after x equals 2. So once we do start paying that 60 an hour. And so what this is saying is no matter if it's the first hour, the second hour, the third hour, the fourth hour, whatever it is, I'm paying $60 for each hour. But for the first 2 hours, I paid $110. I paid an extra $50, right? Plus $50. And so this is basically saying I'm going to account for the fact that for those first 2 hours, I paid an extra $50. So then you'd get 60x plus 100, right? So the answer there would be A, right? And then yes, you also could do it as a regression line. The problem is it could get a little confusing if it's like, if you get confused that it's, actually, let's do it this way. If you were to say that instead of using the points that you just gave me, PCSN, instead you gave a table with the point 1, 110, because that makes sense in like the first hour, and like another one, I think on this question it would actually end up working. Let's find out. So 5, 400, right? 5, 400. I think it would end up giving you the correct answer. It wouldn't. So the point I was trying to make, and it actually shows here, is that if you don't put the exact points where like the slope changed, it's not going to work. So so you have to kind of do it that way. Now David, if there's questions where it doesn't work, then the question is not that, it's not asking about that specific thing. There's some questions that they've been asking recently where like they change a slope of something and then they're like they're trying to get you to find the difference between the two slopes. But if it's just saying that there's some slope for the first hours and then some slope for the second hours, this is how you do it. If you could find a question where it isn't like that and you think you're supposed to be using the same thing, I'd obviously be glad to do that. So anyway, let's take a look at this next question. So this is a pretty good question here. So we have right here, we're asked triangle, and yes, I'll give an example after this. This was actually on the March SAT. Okay, so this question. Triangle ABC and DEF have two angles measuring angle 35. Which of the following additional piece of information is sufficient to prove that triangle ABC is congruent to DEF? So we need to know our congruency rules. So to prove two triangles congruent, there's a couple different ways you can do this. You can do side. You can prove that a side, an angle, and a side are equal. And so let's call this SAS. And when I say this, I don't mean any two sides and any two angles. I mean you have a side and an angle and then a side so that the angle is in between the sides. Just like the A is in between the S here, the angle needs to be in between the sides. So that's one way. Then we have angle, angle, side, so AAS. So you could have an angle, and then a side. So let's do this. So an angle and then another angle and then a side, right? You could also have angle, side, angle. So it would be like this. So let's call it angle, side, angle. And then finally, you could do side, side, side. So if we could just prove that all the sides are the same, then that would also work. So side, side, and side. So here we have two angles that are the same. So we could either find angle, angle, side, or angle, side, angle. So to find angle, side, angle, it would be here. Or we could find, like, because then we have the sides in between. Or we could have angle, angle, angle. So like this side and this side. Or sorry, angle, angle, side. And then we could have angle, angle, side again here. Literally, you just need to find another side here. So anything that tells you to find that the lengths of something and something that correspond or equal works. So the measure of this and this, no, that doesn't work. The lengths of BC and EF are equal. So BC is this and EF is this. That looks pretty good, right? Those are two sides. Be careful. You have to make sure that those are actually like matched up. So if we have BC, that's right here, and then we have EF, that's right here. See how they're both the second and third letter? So that means that the sides match up, which is good. So I'm gonna say that this is probably right. Length of AC and DE are equal. So if you look at AC and DE, see how those don't match up with the letters? We have the first and third letter and then the first and second letter, so that wouldn't work. And then no additional piece is necessary to prove this. That would not work. Now, no additional piece would be necessary to prove that they're similar, but to prove that they're congruent, we would need that last side, right? Something you need to know that Desmos cannot solve is 30, 60, 90 triangles, inscribed angles, adding what happens if you add 50 to every single data point in a set? What happens if you add an outlier to a data set that they don't actually show you? How to evaluate histograms, how to evaluate box plots, how to evaluate basically any plot actually. I'm kind of just rattling things off here. Kind of any geometry question that you could have. Really, it just depends. It's a matter of where how much you know about Desmos. I mean, most of the time, a lot of the algebra and advanced math questions you can do in Desmos, but you need to understand how to do the questions, because if you don't, Desmos isn't going to help you. Now, why would it be AAS and not ASA? It actually doesn't matter which one it was. It was just that there it ended up being that it would have been, I don't even remember, it was AAS. It doesn't make a difference. It's just that there it ended up being that it was AAS. If it had been ASA, then that one would have worked too. So on the SAT, first of all, if I have a data set and I add, let's say I'm going to have this data set. I'll make it so that it works for sure. So I have, let's say it looks like this. Okay. and then I add something all the way out here, and I say, what happens to the median? The median's not going to change. It's going to be here, okay? You could, on the SAT, actually, like, if they say, like, this is, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13, and then this is, like, 1, you could put it into Desmos. By the way, you can find median and mean in Desmos if you just type in mean and then, like, some points. Some other things you could do, by the way, I guess it might be helpful. You can find random. You can find, like, some amount of random numbers. I'm going to do that question, Abdul. I love this question. I'm going to do this question next. So, because I actually saw this question recently. Someone sent this to me a couple days ago, and I thought it was a very, very great question. So we have like, and then we could type like median, and then we put them all in. But here's the thing, that's wastes so much time. If you add one outlier, the median is not going to change. They're going to make sure that, like, technically PCSN, you're right. You're supposed to check if it's like even or odd or whatever. But if they add one outlier, I promise you guys, it's going to be the fact that the median will not change. The mean will be affected. So like here, the mean would get pulled to the left, but the median would not. If you want, you could count it and try and figure it out. But I promise you, because they're going to give you a data set with like 30 points, and you don't want to find the median of a data set with 30 points. And the test is designed for you to get these questions done in, let's say, a minute to a minute and a half. So they're not going to give you questions that are supposed to take you like an extremely long time, if that makes sense, right? So continuing on to Abdul's question. So we have 54x to the fourth plus 219x squared plus 105. And this is actually funny because I've spent the last week showing a question very similar to a lot of my students. So this is equal to k times ax squared plus b times cx squared plus d. And it's saying, what's the minimum value of he wants the minimum value of AB, right? And then also, so PCSN, yes. If you add one outlier, the median will not change. If you add 50 to every single point, or if you add or subtract, let's say anything from every point, then the median will change. But just adding one outlier does not change the median. Yes, you should assume that it will stay the same then. So the first thing I'm going to do is ask myself, is there anything that I can do to like factor something out from both of these equations, or to factor something out from this? Because I'm trying to minimize a times b. So wouldn't I try to get as much of these like numbers outside in this k as I could? So first of all, it looks like I can divide everything by 3. So if I do 54 over 3, I get 18. 219 over 3, I get 73. And 105 over 3, I get 35. So if I do, this would be, let me put this up here. So we'd have 3 times, what was it, 18x to the fourth plus, and then 219 over 3 is 73, plus 73x squared, and then plus 105 over 3 is 35, right? And so then we have this equals k times ax squared plus b times cx squared plus d. So this means that like our k is equal to 3, right? So what I'm going to do now is, so I have 3 times 18x to the fourth plus 73x squared plus 35 times k times, or equals k times ax squared plus b times cx squared plus d. And so what you should be thinking is, what numbers will multiply to 18, and or either what numbers are going to multiply to 18 or what numbers are going to multiply to 35. And the reason why is because if I can say what numbers will multiply to 35, then I can determine what b and c are going to have to be. And if I have what numbers multiply to 18, then I can determine what a and c are, and then I could just start like plugging things in. So if we have 18, it looks like actually PCSN, I have that question solved on my TikTok. It was a couple days ago I solved it. So if you go through Teen Tutors on TikTok, it's in there. So with this question, I think I'm going to say what like this is going to be. So I'm going to do what this is. So basically, b times d has to equal 35, right? These two numbers have to multiply to 35. So it's either b and d are, 1 and 35, or, they could be 35 and 1, or B and D are going to be, 5 and 7. Those are the only two options. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into Desmos and put a regression, and let's actually move this over a little. So what I would do is I'm going to write, Christina, I would bring a calculator. If you're completely comfortable with Desmos, then by all means, you don't need to bring a calculator. I think that it's easier to bring a calculator and do those questions in the calculator where you're just adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing. I think arithmetic in the calculator is easier. And then if you're doing like actual graphing, then Desmos is easier. So it doesn't really matter. So anyway, for this question, I would write that 3 times 18. So I'm going to do a regression. So I have to be writing x1. So x1 to the 4th plus 73 x1 squared plus 35. And that is going to be, I'm then going to put a tilde. So it's going to be 3 for the k times ax squared. And it has to be ax1 squared plus b times, and I mean, I guess you could put k for now. We could do that. Times cx1 squared plus d, right? And so let's now tell it a couple things. First of all, let's tell it k is 3. Second of all, this is basically telling the calculator, again, to play a guessing game. So when it does this, it's going to guess what a, b, c, and d are based on x being 1. You want it to be true for all values of x. So I'm going to give it a list of x values to use. So I'll say x1 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That makes it much better, right? So now let's give it an opportunity and say, okay, let's try b being 1 and d being 35. So I'd say b is 1, and then I'd say d is 35. And let's see what happens. So if you look here, this doesn't have a being an integer, right? And that's obviously not good. You need a to be an integer. So actually, I don't know in this question if you have to. In some question, you do need it to be an integer. So I guess let me see exactly what you said here. So I guess no, you don't need it to be an integer. So like here, then we would have like a times b, so ab. Okay, so far then, this is the lowest possible value, so 0.287, right? So 0.287, so if b is 1, then ab is going to be 0.287. And then we have, okay, let's try b is 35 and d is 1. So then we'll get ab is 350. So that's obviously not right because that's greater than 0.287. Now let's try 5 and 7. So if I try 5 and 7, then again, it's not gonna pull it up. So then if I try 7 and 5, it's gonna tell me that, or actually let me go back. I didn't explain that one as well as I should have. So if I do this, if I say that b is 5, and d is 7, look at what happens. It tells me that a is 0.142857, which means that it's not an integer. So that doesn't work. So now that it does have to be an integer, so now all these are wrong. So far all of them have been wrong because they're not integers. Except for when b, so far the only one that actually did work was when b is 35 and d was 1, right? And then we got 350. So far the lowest we have is 350. So then finally we try the last one where we would make b equal to 7 and d equal to 5. And we would get that b is 7, a is 2, and then all of them are integers. A is 2, c is 9, b is 7, d is 5, so ab is 14. Bang, that's the lowest possible one. So we would get ab equals 14 here, right? Coincidentally, on the other question I did of this, where it was not the same equation, I also got 14. That's extremely odd. It must be a coincidence, but I guess if you have a question like this and you can't figure it out, guess 14. Okay, so let's take a look through some more stuff. So we have a question here. So this is a good one. So let's look here. Let's make this a little smaller. Okay, so we have this question, and we're told that a and b in this question are constants, And then we're told the graph of this pair of equations in the xy plane is a pair of perpendicular lines. Which of the following pairs of equations also represents the pair of perpendicular lines? So we need to remember, for perpendicular lines, we should have that, let's say the slope was 1 over 6. It should turn into negative 6 over 1. We switch where the numbers are in the fractions, and then we make it negative, right? So that's the first thing. And then we're going to use that basically for this question. So what I need to do is get y alone and find the slope of this. So I'm going to have 7y equals negative 5x plus 1. So y equals negative 5 over 7x plus 1 over 7. So what's the perpendicular slope to this line? The perpendicular slope to this line is going to be 7 over 5, right? So the perpendicular slope is going to be positive 7 over 5. So then I'm going to say, okay, I'll do the same thing for the ax plus by as 1. So I'll say, okay, by equals negative ax plus 1. So I'll say y equals negative a over b times x plus 1 over b. And so this is the perpendicular slope. So these are the same. So once you get here, you can do the rest of this question in Desmos, and I'm going to show you how. So basically, we have this. I'll bring it down here. So if I go into Desmos, we have that, let's see, we have that a over b, and actually let me write this here. So we have that negative a over b needs to equal positive 7 over 5, right? So I can write in Desmos, negative a over b is going to be equivalent to, so I'll use the dash, 7 over 5. And so we get some numbers for a and b. And so now all I have to do is just plug in the equations I have. So make sure if you're ever dealing with perpendicular lines, you click the home button. So if you were zoomed out, click the home button. Also, just a comment, make sure if you're dealing with radians or degrees, you're certain of which one you're in. If there's a pi, it should be in radians. If there's a degree sign, it should be in degrees. So all you have to do is, so let's do 10x plus 7y equals 1, and then we will do ax minus 2by equals 1. So this is obviously not perpendicular lines. Two perpendicular lines will make a right angle, so that doesn't work, right? Then we would have, 10x plus 7y equals 1, and then we'd have ax plus 2by equals 1. So that looks pretty good. That looks like it makes an exactly right angle. If we try some other ones, we should see, so for example, if we try 10x plus 7y equals 1, and then 2ax plus by equals 1, it's not going to be a perpendicular line. And then finally, if we try 5x minus 7y equals 1, and then ax plus by equals 1, that's also not going to work there, right? So again, you basically just figure out what the perpendicular slope is to this line, and then you draw that negative a over b is positive 7/5 based on solving, this second equation for y. You set that equal, and you put it into Desmos, and get it from there, right? Let's take a look at some other questions that I want to go through. If we take a look, let's get into another question about having no solutions for a what's the word? Actually, I take it back. Let's get into this type of question. I like this question for practice test 10. So if we have a question like this, what should we do? Right? How should we go about solving a question like this? Because there's a couple different ways you can solve it. Peculiarity, I'm not sure. I'm probably gonna be done around 7. It depends on how much I'm able to get done in the next some amount of time. But I'll be on for probably around 30 or so more minutes. So how do you think you would go about solving a question like this? Because it could be a little challenging to figure this out. So what do you guys think that we would do? right? So the first thing we should probably do is we should realize that the equations are the same, that these two equations are going to be the same. And so if these two equations are the same, then it means that that's not really what we're looking for, right? So what I'm going to do is basically, you need to realize that this is basically asking what is x and y, right? So what I would do is say, okay, let's go into Desmos and let's just plug in. Sorry, let's go into Desmos and let's just put in the equation we have of 2x plus 3y equals 7. And this should be 3y equals 7. And then this is basically saying, so for question A, it would be like x equals r over 5 plus 7. And then it's saying that y would equal negative r over 5 plus 35, right? And so if this is true, look at what's going to happen. So if I then add a slider for r, so let's just say r is 1. First of all, if you add a slider for r, it's going to give you this. You don't want this. It's basically, the calculator thinks you're trying to get a circle, so you don't want that. Basically, if these equations, if this question was, if answer choice A, for example, was correct, when I slid the r, this point where they touch would be on this line, and they're not. So that answer choice is wrong. Now, if I put in answer choice B, and I put negative 3r over 2 plus 7 halves, and then I put y as r, look at what happens when I move this around. See how it stays exactly on the line? So that's how you find that that's your answer. For example, if I put an answer choice C, so I put r, x equals r, and then I put y equals 2r over 3 plus 7/3, it wouldn't work, and so on, right? The other thing that I would recommend knowing to do, and so here's the thing that I should really stress you guys, is while Desmos is great, I feel like this is the test where the people making the SAT are going to now realize that Desmos is really, really, really unfair. Not unfair, but just broken. And I feel like they're going to start giving you questions where you actually have to understand what's going on as opposed to just knowing how to solve it. And so what I would do here is I would say, okay, I would do that. Okay, you solve for x, you say 2x equals negative 3y plus 7. And so you do x equals negative 3y over 2 plus 7. And then what you do is you say, okay, if y is r, if y is equal to r, then x is going to be equal to negative 3r over 2 plus, and this should be plus 7 halves, plus 7 halves. So that gives us a point of negative 3r over 2 plus 7 halves. And then you do the same thing with the y. I'd say 3y equals negative 2x plus 7. And so I'd say y equals negative 2x over 3 plus 7 over 3. And so then it's like, okay, if x is r, then y is negative 2/3 r plus 7/3. And that gives us the point of r comma negative 2r over 3 plus 7/3. And so you would just look for one of these two answer choices. And so the answer there would end up being, and so I forgot to put the r here, comma r. And so the answer there would end up being B. There's also another way that you can do this in Desmos by using the tilde, but it's not that useful. And I'm looking at what's the word? So I'm looking at your question PCSN. It's so we have this basically he asked in the other question that I just did why or just explain how this works. Basically it looks like you put in the equation here, or let's do it in red. So you put in the equation here, and then you're telling the calculator to find the greatest common factor, right? Which is what we had just done manually. This is basically saying create a list that goes from 1 to 10. So list from 1 to 10. And then here you're just setting a equal to 9. And that makes sense here because if a if C was 2, then A would have to be 9 in order for you know, if C is 2, A has to be 9, because we're gonna end up having this equation would be 3 times the 18x to the 4th plus whatever it was like 73x squared plus 35. So if the C here is 2, then the A here has to be 9, because 2 times 9 is 18, right? So you get A is 9, and then you do 9 times 5 is that 9 times 5 is whatever. And yeah, all of them have to be integers. It ends up being that all the other ones are either super large or just not integers. And so yeah, there's only really 2 options there. Now let's talk about a question that's pretty good, and it's I really like this question. So let's look. And this question, by the way, little secret, was basically on the SAT that I took in October of 2023. So clearly, if this is on a practice test and it's also was on a real SAT, they're probably like this question. The question that I saw, it wasn't the exact same, but the question that I solved on the October 2023 exam was 1 over C equals 1 over D plus 1 over E plus 1 over F. And it said, what is C? So do you see how this is very, very, very similar? Right, so they clearly like these questions. Also, it's kind of difficult to do a question like this in Desmos if you don't know what you're doing. So what you would do here is, first of all, you want to get Q alone. So let's get everything that's not a Q on the other side. So 20 over P plus 20 over R plus 20 over S equals 20 over Q. And then like all of these 20s can just go away, because if it's on the top of all of them, then it's not even there. So then we'll have, 1 over P plus 1 over R plus 1 over S equals 1 over Q. And now we just have to start getting rid of all these fractions. So let's multiply everything by Q. And we get Q over P plus Q over R plus Q over S equals 1. And then we have to multiply the P, the R, and the S. So the P, R, and the S. So basically, here's how it's going to work. When I multiply the P by Q over P, it's going to cancel. So we'll have Q times R and S, because the P gets canceled with the bottom. Then for Q over R, the R is going to cancel. So it's going to end up being Q times P times S. The Q over S, the S will cancel. So it'll end up being Q, P, and R. And so we'll end up saying that it's equal to PRS. And so we want Q alone, so we can factor out of Q and say Q times RS plus PS plus PR is equal to PRS. And so let's just move this up a little. So then finally we could divide everything. So we would say Q equals PRS over RS plus PS plus PR, right? So that's how you would do a question like that. So I'm looking for a couple more. And yeah, guys, continue if you have questions, you can continue to send them through the chat, or as well you can send them if it's a picture or something like that. You can send them through the email that I have linked in the description here. Let's take a look at this question. So how about this? It's another question where we just have to solve. So this question, we have this given equation where C is a positive constant, and we're asked which of the following is one of the solutions. So remember, a solution is the same as saying, asking for a solution is the same as saying find X. So our goal here is to find X. So how can we do that? Well, the first thing you should realize is, wait, they're both over this x squared minus c squared, so they're probably telling me that I can add or subtract them, right? So I'm going to move the c squared to the other side. So it'll be x squared over the square root of x squared minus c squared minus c squared over root x squared minus c squared, and that's going to equal 39. Then you should notice that you can combine them, so x squared minus c squared over root x squared minus c squared. And then here's the most important thing. Well, what we could do is we could figure out that this is basically saying we have something over the square root of it. And what does that equal? That just equals a square root. So that's going to end up being just the square root of x squared minus c squared equals 39. And so now to get x, now it's simple. I'll square both sides. I'll say x squared minus c squared equals 39 squared. And then I'll have x squared equals c squared plus 39 squared. Finally, if I square root both sides, x equals plus or minus the square root of c squared plus 39 squared. And you end up getting this. Now, Adrian, yes, you can do that for the other question. On the SAT that I took, I actually could not. I had no calculator on this question because there's a no calculator section. And I really couldn't for the life of me figure out what I was doing. And so I just, for the question I had, I'll just show you guys. I had 1 over c equals 1 over d plus 1 over e plus 1 over f. And this is actually a good lesson that you could learn is you have to learn how to just problem solve. If you see something, I had never seen a question like this when I was practicing. I practiced for 2 months straight. I took probably 25 practice tests in total because there used to be much more resources, or many more resources. And I'd never seen a question like this, and I was really confused. And what I did was I was like, okay, well, if I just make c equal to 1, I can make d equal to 2, and then e and f would both equal 4, and then it'd be like 1 equals 1/2 plus 1/4 plus 1/4, which is true. And then I like plugged them all in to the equations that I was offered, and it ended up being like c equals def over de plus df plus ef. And it was like, okay, well then 1 equals def is 2 times 4 times 4 over de is 2 times 4 plus df is 2 times 4. And then EF is 2 times 4. And you would check if the left and right side are equal. So you get this equals 2 times 4 times 4 is 16. Or sorry, it's 32. Over 2 times 4 is 8. Plus 2 times 4 again is 8. And then this should be 4 times 4, sorry. 4 times 4. And then so plus 16. And so you would get 32 over 32. And so that would equal 1. So like the left and right side would be equal there. So then it would work. Okay, let's take a look at another question here. Okay, so this is a pretty good one. So taking a look at this question, we have in the equation above, b and c are constants. If b minus c is 1/2, which of the following is true? So the first thing that I'm thinking I can do here is let's get everything that's not b and c on the other side. So I would say that, and I think you could solve this with Desmos. What resource would you recommend using to study for the August SAT? CC, I actually have a video where I go through literally all of my resources that I think are useful for the SAT. If you go to my channel and you go to revealing my SAT secrets, that video is literally just me going through how you should study for the SAT and what resources you should use. The links to all of them are in the description, as well as that if you go onto our BuckSoup shop, we have a 4, 8, and 12 week study plan based on how far out you are from the exam. That cheat sheet also has all those links in it as well. So I think there is a way you can do this in Desmos, but I'd honestly think it wouldn't be too hard by hand. And so here's why. So I'm going to make this into b equals 2x minus 7, and I'd make this into c equals 2y minus 7. So if b minus c equals 1/2, then like 2x minus 7 minus 2y minus 7 also equals 1/2, because this is the left side. This should be 1/2. And this is the right side. So this is the left and this is the right, just subtracting the two. So they have to be equal. So it would be, this would give us 2x minus 7 minus 2y plus 7 equals 1/2. So you'd get, these would cancel. You'd get 2x minus 2y equals 1/2. So if you factor out a 2 and get x minus y, you get 1/2. So x minus y would have to equal 1/4. So then you just like figure out. So it'd be you'd be, I don't know, x is y minus 1/4. This wording is weird. This wording is really weird. X is, you would say like, okay, x is 1/4 plus y. X is y minus 1/2. I don't understand. Like, I don't understand the wording of this question, but you would put this into here. I guess it would be A, because that's the only one that even includes the 1/4 there. So yeah. Okay, so oh no, we're good. I don't know why I'm tweaking. Okay, so going into yeah, like this question's really weird. I feel like it's A and it's just worded really weird. There's another question. I've actually, so in the past like month or so, I've been going through past SATs. There's another question that I can think of where like the wording is like really odd. And like this would never slip through the cracks on an SAT, like a real SAT. It would be much more, like, it'd be much more clear. But I want to see actually if there's a way that we can get this done in Desmos. So let's see. So let's look at how we would solve this in Desmos. And so let's see here. So let's pull this up. So I'm thinking here, so again, I actually should keep this as b equals 2x minus 7 and that c equals 2y minus 7, right? And so you should have, oh, I see. Okay, here's what happened. I said b minus c equals 1/2. It's saying b is c minus 1/2. So this means b equals c minus 1/2. So instead I should have written 2x minus 7 equals 2y minus 7 minus 1/2. So you get, 2x minus 7 equals, 2y minus 7 minus 1/2. These minus 7s cancel. You get 2x minus 2y equals negative 1/2. So you get 2 times x minus y equals negative 1/2. And so x minus y equals negative 1/4. So you'd say x equals y minus 1/4, right? So I would still have guessed the correct answer, but so that's like really weird wording. There's another question that I can think of on a SAT. I don't remember where I found it though. But it was weird, and it was like this. And so if we look at this question, so if we try to solve this in Desmos, I feel like if I put I'd probably do b comma c is equivalent, let's see if this would work, is equivalent to 2x1 minus 7 comma 2y1 minus 7. And I would just say like, let's just say x1 equals 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'll give it some numbers to look. Or it doesn't let you do that. And the reason why, actually, by the way, you can't put two lists at once. So something I realized is what you should do for these questions is, like, depending on what you change, like, depending on what you do, like, these numbers get really weird. So, like, if I put x1 equals 10, see how, like, b and c are going to change? It's really weird. Another thing I should probably do is I should say, let's see if I can do three things. So b minus c is another thing I have defined, and that's going to be 1/2. Or, sorry, it's b, see, I messed up again. b is equal to c minus 1/2, right? So, okay, now we have our numbers, right? So it actually works out that it's like, okay, well, if I look at this, x is y minus 1/4, because if y is 0, then x is negative 0.25. So you literally would just plug in the three things that you have defined. I'll open this. You literally just type in the three things that you have defined, and then you realize that, okay, I have that x is negative 0.25, so it's 1/4 less than y. Santi, if you are cooked, my biggest thing that I could say is just learn how to use Desmos tonight, really. Learn how to use Desmos, learn the grammar rules. That's pretty much like the bulk of how you're gonna boost your score but in a day. But really don't sweat it. Yeah, so I mean, this question, I think it's faster to do it in Desmos, but you just have to realize that, like, I mean, this is a lot to have to type in, and you have to get it all correct. So it's like easier to, I think it's easier to be able to see things out on paper, so you kind of know what is going on, if that makes sense. But yeah, I'm trying to pull up a question. So I want to go over quickly. I want to go over a conversion factor question. So with conversion factors, we need to be careful because if we have square units, it's very, very tricky. Not even tricky, but they're trying to trick you. So a certain town is an area of 4.36 square miles. What's the area in square yards if 1 mile equals 1760 yards? So we need to go from square miles, so square miles, to square yards, which is the same as saying, not to yards, to square yards. So this is the same as saying miles squared to like yards squared, right? So instead of saying 1 mile equals 1760 yards, we need to square both sides. So 1 mile equals 1760 yards. So I need to square both sides. So I'd get 1 mile squared equals, and then if I did 1760 squared, so if I do 1760 squared, I'm going to get 3097600. So so equals 3097600 yards squared. And then now I need to do my conversion factor, or my equation. So just like when you're in chemistry class, you go from 4.36 miles squared, and we're trying to get rid of miles and turn it into yards. So I'm going to put that over miles squared. That way the units will cancel, and then I'll put yards squared on the top. And so I'll put 1 mile on the bottom, and 3097600 yards squared. And so it'd be 4.36 times 3097600, or not 20, it'd be 3, right? So 13505, so it'd be D, right? So how do I get better on SAT English? I'm confusing and I genuinely am stuck. The first thing, as I've said a couple times today, is you need to stop looking for the correct answer. You need to start looking for the wrong answers. It's much, much easier. It's so much easier to say that a question is wrong than to say that a question is right. Second of all, you need to learn your punctuation rules, and then you need to learn how to use these punctuations. As in, there's several different rules for punctuating, and you need to know when to use each of them. Otherwise, you're not going to have a fun time on the SAT. Then you need to either start studying vocab. If you haven't already studied vocab and it's already the day of the exam, I wouldn't recommend like trying to rush through and study some vocab, because it isn't that important, because you can't really prepare for the words they're going to give you. They're going to give you words you've never seen anyway. It really is just it's just a matter of how much you prepare for the grammar and the vocab. You can't prepare for the reading, it's just practice. And yeah, so another thing you could do is try reading some books. That's another pretty helpful thing. For the vocab, I don't really even know if it's that helpful to go over a vocab, like a couple. I mean, I'll do one right now, and then there's another math one I want to do. But I'll show you kind of like how you should go about them. But the thing is, it's like if you don't know the words, then you're not going to get the questions right. Now, something you say is that you're practicing but getting bad scores on tests. Something that a lot of people will do is they're all about taking these practice tests. It's also so important what you do in between the practice tests. You should be taking a practice test, reviewing this practice test, and then you should be practicing specific questions based on what you got wrong in the practice test. Then you should be either doing some type of Khan Academy, you should be doing some type of book, something where you can continue to reinforce what you got wrong in the practice test. And then, and only then, can you go back in and take another one. Basically, in order to get a very, very good score on the SAT, you cannot get the same question wrong twice. I like to say this because you should be learning from your mistakes, and after you get something wrong twice, there's no reason for you to get it wrong again. So make sure you're making the most out of your practice tests and actually like doing the work. So let me take this question. So we have, it is by no means blank to recognize the influence of Dutch painter this person on this paintings. Indeed, This person cites Bosch as an inspiration. So this person is citing this other guy as an inspiration, right? So because of this, it would be important, right? It'd be important to recognize the influence of the painter, right? So it would be by no means not important, right? Because it is by any means important. So it would be by no means not important. So you put in a word that you think, right? And then you go down here and you see, oh my God, the word unimportant is an answer. So, that's your answer. So for the grammar rules, I'll just go over a couple really quick. If you want every single usage of a punctuation, that's in our cheat sheet. That's linked in our description. Now, if you already kind of know the grammar rules or you find them from somewhere else, we have a video going over not what the grammar rules are, but how to answer the grammar questions. So there's specific types of grammar questions, and basically saying, now if you understand the grammar rules, what are the grammar questions going to ask you? And so the first thing that a lot of people misunderstand, I guess I'll go through a couple misconceptions. One big misconception is that if you see a semicolon and a period, then you cross them both out. And I'm here to tell you that that is incorrect. It is incorrect. Gatekeep this from all your friends. It is incorrect. Everyone that says this, it's not true. Here's why. One of the grammar rules is if I have a list, I say John, actually let me just type this, it's much simpler. So let's do John, I'm going to the beach with John, Jacob, and Jack, right? So I'm going to the beach with John, Jacob, and Jack. We use commas, right? But what if I say I'm going to the beach with John, who is my best friend, Jacob, who is my dad, and Jack, who is my little brother. So this is called a complex list. And the reason it's called a complex list is because we have punctuation inside of the list, right? So when we have punctuation inside of the list, we have to use semicolons. So you're going to see questions where there's a complex list and they trick you. Let's say that this was the underlined portion, okay? And you're going to see a semicolon and a period and say, nope, it can't be either of them because someone on TikTok told me that that's how it works. Well, that's not how it works. So you're not going to do that. You first check if it's a complex list. If it's not, then you could probably say if there's a semicolon and a period, they're both wrong. But if you don't check for a complex list and you just say because it's a semicolon and a period, they're both wrong, then it's not good. Now, the second thing is for colons. Colons are used to specify things. So for example, I say let's do this in a different color. So I say the study had two groups, and then I do a colon. Group one studied for 2 hours per week, and group 2 studied for 10 hours per week. So piece of 10, I actually went through 2 of those in the video that I was referring to of the SAT grammar. So if you want, you could check that out. I have a pretty good method for going through those. So I have this question, right? The study, why is it like that? The size is off. Okay, the study had 2 groups. Group 1 studied for 2 hours per week, and group 2 studied for 10 hours per week. So we're introducing that the study had 2 groups and then specifying what those 2 groups are. Misconception is that you say, I am going to the store to get cheese, bread, and milk. And you say, oh, because this is a list, we have a semicolon. No. Or we have a colon, sorry. No. Whatever comes before the semicolon has to be an independent clause. If it's not, then you can't have a semicolon, or you can't have a colon, right? So let's look at this. Let's talk about what separates 2 independent clauses. Right, so that's going to be, first, it's going to be obviously a period, a semicolon. It could also be a semicolon and then followed by a transition. It could also be a transition followed by a semicolon. And then, yeah, after this, I'll head over into a transition question. Transition followed by a semicolon. Then we have, we could have a comma and a fanboys. You have to have a fanboys, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. And then we could have a, what's it? We could have a, we could obviously have a colon, right? So those are the ways that we're going to separate two independent clauses. Now, what happens when we start a sentence with a dependent clause? If I start a sentence after a dependent clause, you need a comma. I literally just used that right here. So if you start a sentence, so I'll say, if you start a sentence, this was ironically an example. If you start a sentence with a dependent clause, you need a comma. So following a dependent clause must be a comma, if that's how it starts a sentence. Now, how do I know if it's a dependent clause? First of all, you can't say it as its own sentence. Second of all, you could look for trigger words like after, before, during, while, because, that, though, if, when, things like that. And that's gonna kind of signify that you're doing a dependent clause. So let's look. This will probably be the last thing I'm gonna go over. So if you guys have any other questions, I'd send them in now, because I'll probably after this question be heading out to talk to some of my own clients before the test. So let's look through a transition question or two. So if I go in here, let's look. Alright, so this one's pretty good. Okay, so we have here in his 1925 book, The Morphology of Landscape, U.S. geographer Carl Sauer challenged prevailing views about how natural landscapes influence human cultures. So then we have Sauer argued that instead of being shaped entirely by their natural surroundings, cultures play an active role in their own development by virtue of their interaction with their environment. So it says he challenged prevailing views, and then it says he argued that instead of being shaped entirely by their natural surroundings, cultures play an active role, blah, blah, blah. So it's then telling us, how did he do this? It's telling us, how did he do this? How did he do this? How did he challenge prevailing views, right? So because it's doing that, right, it's specifying it, right? We're seeing specification, right? It's specifying it. So because of that, it's going to be specifically, right? It's kind of, you just have to break down what's going on in each transition situation. And that should usually lead you, or guide you, I should say, to the correct answer there. So continuing, we could look at another one, and then I'm going to probably go over, I'll go over similar triangles and inscribed angles there. I actually have a question that, if I could find it, I really like on one of the tests. So let's take a look at one or two more of these. So if I take a look at, let's go over here. So all right, let's see this one. All right, so looking at this, and thank you, Yassine. So we have some members of the U.S. Supreme Court have resisted calls to televise the court's oral arguments, concerned that the participants would be tempted to perform for the cameras. So basically, U.S. Supreme Courts are resisting calls to televise the arguments. They think that participants would be tempted to, perform for the camera, right? Act differently, and lower the quality of discourse. Blank, the justices worry that most viewers would not even watch the full deliberations, only short clips that could be misinterpreted and mischaracterized. So first of all, this first part is saying that members of the Supreme Court. Now, obviously, you don't have to write this down on the day of the test, right? But you should really be thinking about it in your head. On really long, hard passages, I actually do recommend to like try and you like highlight the words and then you click the note icon and you take some notes. But I would definitely do that. But not for questions like this, you just have to think about it in your head. So members of the Supreme Court don't want televised meetings because it would ruin the, I don't know, just say it would ruin the meetings, right? And then this is saying that most viewers wouldn't watch the whole thing, so they would just misinterpret out of context clips. So because of that, this is basically giving another reason why these members of the Supreme Court don't want this, right? They're giving, you know, just again, yeah, like another reason why they don't want this. So it's adding on. It's giving an additional reason why members of the Supreme Court don't want this. So here it would just be additionally, right? Additionally, the justices worry that most viewers would not, they don't want, additionally, they worry that most viewers would not even watch the full deliberations, right? Like it's adding on. Okay, so let's take a look here. I really hope I can find this. This question from an SAT about inscribed angles that I do really like. And then I'll end with a question that is that's for fun here. Let's see if I can find this. And if I can, I'll just draw it actually. Yeah, let's just draw it. I'm not gonna try to find this. I can just draw it. So let's draw a circle. And okay, so this is, let's say this is a perfect circle, right? And we have point A that lies on the circle. And so point A is here. Let's just draw it like this. And then let's draw this. Okay. And so it says, so this is the center. Let's call this, I don't know, let's just call this the center. And so this is x degrees. And so this is 25 degrees. This is 25 degrees. And then it asks, what's x? What's x in degrees? So how would you solve a question like this, right? How are you going to go about solving this this question? There's actually a couple of different ways that you could do this, and yeah. So how do you guys think you would go about solving this? Let's see. So you would split it up into two triangles. However, they're not equilateral. They are isosceles, and here's why. So this is a radius, this is a radius, and this is a radius. So this angle has to also be 25, right? And so like for the same reason, then this angle is 25, right? So if both of these angles are 25, then this total angle of A, that's 50 degrees, right? So if this is 50, then x is double. And the reason why is because if we have, just quickly, if we have a circle and we have this angle that touches the circle, and then we have another in the center, if I call this x, or let's call this x, then this would be 2x degrees, right? It doubles. So this is 50, then this angle is 100 degrees, right? And so that's what we'd have to do for that question. Now, I wanted to pose another question. Let's see if I can get it up. So let's see. Let's see if I can get this up. If this page will behave that I'm trying to pull this question from. Okay, so we have, so let's draw this. So we have a circle, and in this circle, so by the way, x would be 100 because if we determine that this is if we determine that what's it called, x is, sorry, if we determine that a is 50 degrees, then this angle is double. So there's a rule where if we have that like some point on the edge of the circle makes some arc. So let's draw some arc, and this is called an arc. This is called an arc. So let's call it like this, right? And so then we have like right here, that'll be double, right? Thank you, Jordan. Thank you for tuning in the live stream. I hope that you enjoyed. So anyway, let's go back into this question that I was trying to pull up, and let's look at this. So it's another type of inscribed circle type of thing. So I have this, and let's see. So we say that point, I'm going to say that point O is going to be the center of the circle. Okay. Okay, so we have that this angle is 30 degrees. This is the center, so I'll call it C. And then we have that, so this is A. Let's call this, let's actually call this O. Let's call this B. And then let's call this C. And so it says that this is 18, right? And it asks, what's the arc length of AB? It says, what is the arc length of AB? So it's asking for this length, right? What formula should you remember for the exam? Vertex formula, circle equation, quadratic formula, and with the quadratic formula, sum of solutions, product of solutions, discriminant. You should remember how to change from degrees to radians, radians to degrees. You should know difference of squares, how to find the slope with rise over run, distance formula, which you don't actually really need to know, because if you guys didn't know, you can just type in like A equals 2, and yeah, you also do have to know surface area. They don't give you surface area, but you could like figure it out. So like if then there's like 1 and 10 and you say B equals, you could literally just say the distance between A and B by doing this, and it would give you the distance. So you don't really even need to know the distance formula. So like arguable, but for sure the vertex formula, for sure the quadratic formula, for sure the distance, not the distance, for sure quadratic formula, product of solutions, sum of solutions, all that. And like even though a lot of that can be solved in Desmos, it's just gonna waste so much time, which is the big problem. So anyway, going back to this question, how would we get this done? How would we get this question done? So the first thing that I'm thinking is, okay, well, similar to the other one, these two sides are both radiuses, which means that they're the same. So both of them have, and this has a measure of 30 degrees, right? And so also, not only is this side 18, but this side is 18 and this side is 18 because they're all radiuses. The distance from the center to any point on the circle is the same. So now we say, okay, well, since this is 30, this is 30, and this is a right triangle, or not a right triangle, but just a triangle, we would say this is 120, right? So what we need to do is you get circumference. So to get AB, you do the circumference times the angle of the arc. So the angle of the arc is this, right? The angle of the arc is angle O, right? So angle O, let's type this in black. So angle O over 360. You put it over 360, right? So you would do the circumference, which is going to be 2 pi r, times the angle O, which is 120 over 360. The radius is 18, so you have 2 pi times 18, and 120 over 360 is 1/3, so times 1/3. So 36 pi times 1/3 would give you 12 pi, right? So your answer there would be 12 times pi. Right, so I just want to look at one or two more questions, and then I think that's going to be it for the live. Okay, so let's look here. I wanted to go over this. And now, Martin, for the second module vocab, first of all, on all the vocab, what your outlook, your strategy shouldn't really change for both the first module, whether it's easy, hard, or in the middle, or anywhere. If you have a vocab question, you fill in the blanks with what you would put. Let's say we're in English class and your teacher's asking you to fill in the word with whatever you want. Fill it in with your own word. And then you look for the word that you think is closest. So let's say you only know 2 of those words. You know 2 of the words and you say, I think that I should put this word in the blank. And the 2 words that you know don't match. So now you're at a 50-50 shot of getting a question right, but it's kind of like a guess. So what you would do is at that point, you start matching up words to what you would think is like gonna work. So for example, let's say like the word is innocuous, right? Like what does innocuous mean? Innocuous, how about you just say it means innocent, right? How about instead of saying haphazard, and I'm using these words because they show up on practice tests, you make it hazard. This is not a foolproof method because sometimes it wouldn't fully work, but it's better than nothing. And it kind of works sometimes because like the suffix or prefix will be the same, the root will be the same. So like they'll have some type of similarity in meaning. And so then if you can't even do that, you kind of just rely on your instinct to determine if you're talking about the correct, connotation. You should just hope that you could say, is it a positive or negative connotation? You say, is positive or negative, and you try to match a word there. Obviously, you don't have a dictionary on you. So all you could really do, especially this close to the test, is just worry about other topics. Now, for Jaden, first of all, learn how to use Desmos. Extremely well, learn how to use Desmos. A couple of different people that I would recommend is Project Academic Weapon on TikTok, cracked.desmos. So let me type this. So Project Academic Weapon. It's pretty good. Actually, first you should learn SAT math. We have or Teen Tutors, so that's us on YouTube. We have Desmos guides for like basic Desmos. Then for more complex, there's cracked.desmos on Instagram. Better than that, there is Project Academic Weapon. His stuff's pretty good. Project Academic Weapon. And then also there's what's the word? You can obviously look at our TikToks, right? Now, we have tips for word problems in ratio and quadratic. Think of a ratio as if it is a fraction. It's the same thing. If I say like the ratio of x to y is like 9 to 2, that's the same as saying x over y is 9 over 2, right? If you're given the circumference of a cone, how would you find the volume? Actually, pretty easy. So what you would have to do is the circumference of the cone will be used to find the radius. I can't draw a cone. So the circumference would be used to find the radius. And so 2 pi r equals the circumference. So, you'd find the radius. And so what's the volume? The volume is 1/3 pi r cubed. 1/3 pi r squared h of a cone. So you would find the radius, you'd do 1/3 pi r squared, and then you would do multiply by h, right? So yeah, I like To study, by the way, we have our SAT. I have a video up revealing my SAT secrets that is basically telling you guys what I think you should use to study. And all of it is linked there. But yeah, the QBank, SAT, Meltzer, College Panda, all of that is really, really good. I thought I had seen a question that I wasn't able to get through. Oh, so yeah, really worry about getting Desmos done if you're really late in. And yeah, let's do one last question here that I want to talk about. I want to see if you guys can figure this one out. So you have a question like this. So all of the study resources that I like are linked in my SAT secrets video, right? So that's awesome, by the way, Titan Shark. Prep Hub, I've actually never heard of Prep Hub. Let's take a look. Prep Hub. I've never seen it, right? So yeah. Now with if you I'll link this in the description actually. So in the description of this video, I'll link it right now. You can find all of the things that I personally, and again, this does not mean that everything else is bad. It just means all of the things that I use, all the things that I use are good, and yeah, I think that Titan Shark, everyone should be using as many resources as you can. I'd actually love to know a little bit more about Prep Hub, because I just searched if I couldn't find anything. But what would you do on a question like this? Right? There's a lot of great YouTube channels actually, that are extremely, extremely helpful. Cracked. They posted so much on TikTok, but they started posting on YouTube as well. And yeah, I see here Prep Hub. So yeah, that's yeah, it looks pretty good. So how would we get a question like this done? Well, this is quadratic formula. So we have x squared minus k over 2x. This is going to be a quadratic formula question. So it's going to be minus 2p equals 0. And so what's a quadratic formula? It's x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, right? And so what we would have is k over 2 plus or minus the square root of b squared is going to be negative k over 2 squared minus 4 times a is 1 and c is negative 2p all over 2a. And yeah, you could do that where you give them all values. But it would probably honestly take longer to do that if you're doing it in Desmos there. So then we'd have, okay, k over 2 plus or minus the square root of k squared over 4 plus 8p all over 2. And then you say, all right, well, we have that we need to get rid of this over 4 for the k. So what I could do is I could say this is k over 2 plus or minus, and I have to get rid of that because all of these, inside of the root, it's not over 4. So I would do plus or minus the square root. I'm going to factor out a 1/4, and I'll get k squared, and then plus what? Well, 1/4 times what is going to give you 8p? It's going to be 32p, right? So plus 32p all over 2. And so if I factor this 1/4 out, it's going to be k over 2 plus or minus the square root, or plus or minus 1/2 times the square root of k squared plus 32p all over 2. And then I'll move these over 2's to the bottom and you basically just multiply them to the bottom. So it becomes k plus or minus the square root of k squared plus 32p over 4, which is basically the same as b, right? Jennifer, to deal with test anxiety, while this might sound ridiculous, it actually does help. Try to go to sleep tonight using some type of guided meditation. If you wake up in the morning, try to do some type of guided meditation. You could literally search up on YouTube guided meditation for anxiety, guided meditation to fall asleep for anxiety, guided meditation for test anxiety. Even it'll probably come up with something. And so another thing is, if you've taken enough tests, you know how this test is going. You're not gonna have any surprises. So just understanding that you've prepared properly and not overthinking what you're doing. Like when you take a practice test, you're not overthinking what you're doing. You're not mindlessly, but you're just, passing through the test. And treat it the same way. You really want to not worry so much about the test. You're going to go into the testing center tomorrow and you're going to do the best you can. Now, another thing is be careful that you're reading slowly and carefully. You're not skipping over questions. You're not like, there's questions where it'll like give you a graph on the math and it'll give you this graph and it'll say, let's do this. It'll say like, so let's say it's like this. Actually, I'll do it like this. And it'll say like, it'll be like an easy graph. And it'll be like, this is f of x plus 19. Like this is f of x plus 19. And it'll tell you to find f of x. And then everyone just finds out what this graph is. Don't do that. I'll never forget. I got a 1570 when I took my SAT. And I got 10 points off. They used to return our test back to us. And I got 10 points off because in the test, they asked a question about a lewd with an A versus a lewd with an E. And I'd never seen a question like this asked. And I completely panicked. And I don't know how, but I forgot in the moment that allude, like with an A, as in like an illusion. An illusion in a book, or like alluding to a Greek god, or something like that. And I completely forgot it. And that was the one question I got wrong in the whole grammar section. And so I lost 10 points on the test. So really be careful. Take a step back. Be like, do I remember doing this? Do I know this word? I feel like I've heard this word in conversation before. I feel like I've seen this question before. This is just being worded different. All that stuff. What to do with vocab if I don't know the word? Guess. No, I'm kidding. Try to match it to a word that you do know. And then if you can't even match the word you think you know, like try to like innocuous again. Like I keep using as an example. Innocuous, turn it into innocent. Haphazard, turn it into hazard. And then if you can't even do that because like you can't even think of a word that's similar to it, just try to match it up to a connotation. Be like, do I think this is positive or negative? All right, so we're gonna do one more question, and then we're gonna probably end this one. Now, PCSN, if you resend me this picture, it's like cut off at the top. I can't see what the first line is saying. I know this question. You think vocab, grammar, then comprehension is a good flow? Yes, that's what I do. Or that's what I would do, sorry. Either that, or I would recommend going backwards, like doing like grammar, vocab, comprehension, literally anything that does comprehension last. On the second module, maybe do the vocab after the comprehension, because there's a good likelihood that you're not going to know what's going on in the vocab, so it's like whatever. Something that you should do in the math is try to do, like if you're going to skip questions in the math, try to do the grammar try to do the open response questions first, because it's much more likely you're going to get it wrong. It's much more likely that you're going to get it wrong if you have to guess on an open response, and if you have to guess on a non-open response, right? So that's another thing that's kind of important. Now, and cigar, you're not cooked. That is a good flow. Let me look back at this question that you had sent. The maximum value of the function, which the following displays as a coefficient, as a constant or coefficient, the maximum value of the function where x is greater than or equal to 0 occurs. Let's see here. put it over here and take out this part. All right, so let's bring this back over here. So we're asked which gives the equation, which of the following displays as a constant or coefficient the maximum value of the function it defines where x is greater than 0. So what we should be looking for is a function where it's going down. Thank you for the wallpaper. This has been my wallpaper for a long time. But so we have, basically, it's asking when x is greater than 0, we need this coefficient to be a maximum. So as in, like, okay, like it should probably look like this. I mean, we're talking about exponentials. So literally all you would have to do is go into Desmos and be like, all right, well, we have 33 to the power of 0.4 to the x plus 3. So this looks good, right? This looks like it's a maximum value. And let's check. All right, sorry, this should be 46 to the x plus 3, sorry. So actually, no, it doesn't work, right? Because this is not a constant. You know, this is not a constant in the question. And so that's not right. And then we have 33 times 0.16 to the, or times 0.4 to the power of, you know, x minus 2. And so if I scroll up here, okay, great, 33. That's the maximum, right? And it's going to go down, right? So our answer would be 2 only, right? I'm bringing a laptop to the test. Should I bring a wired mouse also? Feel free to do that. I would recommend against it just because it's going to take up space on your key or on your desk. Yeah, bring your PC as well. Yeah, so I would recommend to do that. And so is the constant or coefficient for the second equation just not 33? It's just 33. It's just 33. Like it's saying 33 could be it, 0.16 could be it, and 0.4 could be it. I wonder if you brought a blanket, would they let you continue to take the test? I think they would. Now, keep in mind though, on a serious note, if you bring a non-wired something, so a Bluetooth, they will probably not let you take the exam with it. So if you have like an iPad that has, if you have an iPad that has, what's it called? I can't even think. If you have an iPad that has Bluetooth, like an Apple iPad, and it connects with Bluetooth, it wouldn't work. Also, Cigar, you are wrong for this question. It does not. Would it be wrong? So anyway, and I'll get to that in a second. Yeah. So I guess PCSN, they let you use a Bluetooth mouse. I've heard and I've experienced they don't let people. I mean, at this testing center near me, you can't use a Bluetooth mouse. So just be careful, or like a Bluetooth anything. So the constant for the first one, it's asking which of the following equation displays as a coefficient this function, right? 33, and so we get this function of 2.112, right? So that is not that is not the maximum, right? The maximum here when x is greater than or equal to 0 is 2.112. So 0.4 is not that, and 33 is not that. And even if you could manipulate the equation, maybe, I mean, I guess you're saying if it's 0.4 to the power of 3, you get, yeah, like that doesn't work either. So I don't really know where, I don't know, maybe there's a confusion there. But no, what do you recommend in me preparing for the SAT? I study a lot, but mess up on tests. I don't know why. Should I get a tutor, keep trying, or what? Here's what I recommend. I usually say try to self-study the exam once, maybe even twice. If you find that no matter how hard you're studying, you're hitting a plateau, you are not getting better, or even if you are getting better, it's not fast enough, I would recommend to find a private tutor. What I do not recommend is do not start doing group classes. And again, everyone is different, but in my personal opinion, group classes aren't that good. You want to find a private tutor that will help you out. And a lot of times group classes are not, they're not as personalized and catered to you. And you'll actually end up getting better help for your time if you had a private tutor. So let's see what you're saying. You're saying 33 times 0.4 to the power of x times 0.4. So you're saying 33 times 0.4 to the power of 3. right? So that's sure, but that's not displaying it as a constant or a coefficient. We know, like, you realize that this happens, but that's not displaying it as a constant or coefficient. It specifically needs to be in the equation. It can't be like hidden in the equation. I get that it's a little weird of a wording, but it's like asking specifically it needs to be in the equation, like when we see it, that it's there. Not that like it's hidden behind and we have to like figure it out, right? If I don't get above 1,400 after doing 1,300 problems and practicing around 10 hours a day for 3 weeks, I don't know what I'm doing, what to do next. Honestly, that'd be a little surprising. Not surprising, but I really think you just go in and you know you've studied hard enough, you've done the work, and you know what's going on, right? Really don't second guess yourself tomorrow. It's and constant, it's just basically saying like it wants it as a coefficient, means like a number. Specifically, coefficient would be this. Coefficient would be the number in the front, and the constants would be the number in here. You don't really have to know the difference, but like for example, if I have like 2x squared plus 3x plus like 2, these are like coefficients. If I have like 3 times 2 to the power of x, like this 3 is a coefficient and the 2 is a constant, but it really doesn't matter. It's basically just numbers inside of the equation that you could see. So yeah. but yeah. So yeah. Again, guys, just the last thing to say, if you guys are worried, don't be, okay? You never know how easy or hard the test is going to be until you get in there. Especially if you haven't taken a test, a real SAT before, it might be more hard. It might be more challenging than you're expecting. It might be easier than you're expecting, and you really just don't know. What I really recommend: get a good night's sleep tomorrow. Read the news in the morning. Jump out of bed. I am telling you guys, as silly as it may seem, do not sleep like in past your alarm. Don't snooze it. Don't do any of that. Don't scroll while in your bed. None of that. Don't do any of that. So, yeah. And yeah, Vass, I'm still on live. And so we're about to end the stream. So again, guys, go get a good night's sleep. It's almost 8 o'clock, at least where I am. And yeah. If you guys have any more questions, if you guys have any more questions, feel free to send me an email. I'm going to go talk to some of my own personal clients, and I will get back to those emails as soon as I can. And keep studying, guys. And of course, good luck tomorrow. After the test, I'll be posting a video with what's the word? I'll be posting a video with I can't think of the word. I'll be posting a video reviewing the SAT so that you guys can all discuss how you think it went. So check that out probably around noon tomorrow. I'll get it up after the SAT is done so that you guys could discuss in the comments how you think it went. And then, by the way, PCSN, no. Like, the answer for that other question is that we have here, like, it's for the second one is 33 is the max, right? So that's the whole point, that 33 is a coefficient here. So yeah, I'm gonna post the VOD to this. So if you want to watch, you can see any of these questions, and yeah, you can rewatch it and whatever. It should go up in a couple minutes, hopefully. So yeah, good luck tomorrow, guys, and I hope you do well. And I'll see you guys in the next live stream.